On the day of Deirdre's second marriage, Alfred, her ex-husband, also attended the ceremony. He watched her put on the purest white wedding dress and slowly walk to the center of the stage. The old wristwatch she had given him in their youth burned painfully against his skin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. Deirdre finished cooking. Just as the clock struck 7, the sound came right on time at the door. She stepped forward, took Alfred's suit jacket, and caught a distinct whiff of tobacco and alcohol. Shall we eat first? Alfred gave a faint hum, weariness lingering between his brows. I've got another work assignment later, at 10. Deirdre paused slightly. I made your favorite sweet and sour ribs today. Alfred paid no attention, casually humming in acknowledgement. As they sat at the table, Deirdre raised her glass. To our 5th wedding anniversary. Wait a moment. Alfred set down his chopsticks and quickly answered the phone. Deirdre froze with her wine glass suspended mid-air as the man across from her launched into social niceties. You flatter me. Since I've taken charge of this case, of course I intend to see it through to victory. Deirdre watched him effortlessly deliver practiced pleasantries. Indeed, having just won the billion-dollar land dispute case at the World Trade Center and becoming the firm's newest partner. He was currently the hottest commodity in legal circles. It's perfectly normal to have many people offering congratulations. Deirdre withdrew her hand and took a sip of wine, the bitterness spreading through her mouth along with the alcohol. The next moment, however, her gaze lingered on his wrist. It was a new wristwatch, a Patek Philippe worth $1 million. He replaced the wedding gift she had given him. On this very day of their 5th anniversary, a deeper pang of sorrow struck her heart. Alfred finally hung up the phone with difficulty. Deirdre gestured toward his wrist. Where's your wristwatch? Alfred paused, his tone indifferent. Got tired of it. Changed to a new one. Deirdre wanted to say more when another call came through. Alfred answered the phone while Deirdre sighed silently, only to notice her own phone screen flicker faintly. Professor, emergency. I can't handle that client. Please help. It was the new court mediator trainee, a tall but dim-witted intern who'd grown in height but not in brains. Deirdre glanced at Alfred, who was still talking away, then looked at the long cold dishes on the table before speaking helplessly. You eat. I have something to attend to. I need to go to the courthouse. Alfred frowned, his gaze piercing straight at Deirdre. Deirdre, come back and sit down. It was his usual tone. I really have something to do. Deirdre glanced at the frantically bombarded message interface. Are you seriously busier than me? Alfred hung up the phone, eyebrows raised. If you hadn't called me back, I'd be working overtime at the law firm right now. Deirdre felt a sudden pang in her chest. She stared straight into Alfred's eyes without another word. But her determination to leave was unmistakable. Alfred seemed scalded by that gaze, his voice tinged with anger. Then don't call me for the next anniversary. We're both busy anyway. Alfred with that, he was the first to rise and leave. Deirdre stood frozen in place, not making a sound for a long while. By the time they left the courthouse, the sky had already grown quite late. Deirdre arrived at the cafe opened by her best friend Elsa. Only after recounting their recent argument did Deirdre finally catch her breath. Elsa set down her coffee and immediately launched into a furious tirade against Alfred. Deirdre listened to the endless stream of complaints, feeling the tightness in her chest gradually melt away. Elsa observed that Deirdre looked less gloomy, then gently advised, Today is your 5th wedding anniversary. No matter what, it shouldn't be spent arguing. Didn't you switch from being a lawyer to a judge precisely because you wanted to nurture this family? Deirdre's expression darkened. After a long pause, she finally spoke. You're right. Leaving the cafe. Deirdre turned and headed straight toward Alfred's DS law firm. She bought Alfred's favorite lemon tart, walking briskly. Soon, the massive logo of DS came into view. Deirdre lowered her head and sent a message to Alfred. Are you still in the meeting? Soon, he replied. Yes. Deirdre put away her phone, entered the company building, and walked toward the reception desk. Hello, I'm here to see Alfred, the lawyer. I can wait for him on the 1st floor until his meeting ends. Deirdre offered a polite smile. The receptionist looked surprised. I'm sorry, Mr. Alfred isn't here. He hasn't been back to the law firm for a week. Deirdre stared blankly for a long moment before lowering her head to unlock her phone and type. I'm at the law firm's reception. The message interface fell into silence. Only after quite some time did it finally display the other party as typing. I had to step out briefly to meet with a client. Deirdre read the message and looked up to find the receptionist still smiling at her. She instinctively put on a polite smile, gave a slight nod, and turned to leave. As she passed the trash bin at the side of the building, Deirdre paused, then tossed away the lemon tart without looking back. Alfred returned home very late. Deirdre sat on one side of the bed, flipping through the case files in her hands. After Alfred quickly washed up and lay down on the other side of the bed, she finally spoke. "It's my mom's birthday on Friday, make sure you set aside some time." Deirdre waited a long time without hearing a response and couldn't help asking again, "Are you even listening?" Alfred responded coldly with just a single word. Deirdre couldn't quite describe what she was feeling, only that the dense text before her eyes had turned into swarming ants, gnawing incessantly at her heart, though they lay on the same bed. She could keenly sense the vast distance between their hearts at this moment. After work on Friday, Deirdre made a point to send a message to Alfred, "Remember to be on time." "Okay." Alfred's reply came belatedly. Only after receiving his confirmation did Deirdre take a taxi to Deirdre's mom's place. Deirdre's family was a single-parent household, with Deirdre's mom supporting the entire family alone. "Your second aunt and cousin are here." Deirdre's mom looked behind Deirdre, her face showing disappointment. Alfred didn't come. Deirdre didn't answer and silently entered the house. Deirdre's aunt heard the commotion and immediately nudged her daughter. "Helen, go say hello. Your brother-in-law is a partner at DS, and you'll need his help to find a job." Helen dragged her feet over and immediately exclaimed, "Sister came back alone." Deirdre's aunt instantly raised her voice. "Could it be a fight?" "Well, after 5 years of marriage without conceiving, conflicts are bound to arise." Deirdre furrowed her brows upon hearing this and was about to speak when Deirdre's mom stopped her. "Enough, let's eat while we wait." Deirdre's mom shot Deirdre a warning glance. Deirdre had no choice but to swallow her words. At the dinner table, she kept hoping to see a familiar figure appear at the doorway, but even after all the relatives had left, Alfred never showed up. Deirdre's mom frowned at Deirdre. "Have you been taking the medicine I gave you on time? Why aren't you pregnant yet?" Deirdre was utterly exasperated. Getting pregnant isn't that simple. Deirdre's mom wouldn't let up. "Next week you're seeing the doctor I booked for you. You must understand, a marriage without children has no future. Surely you don't think you can keep Alfred tied to you with love alone when you're old and faded?" Deirdre was momentarily speechless, feeling as if a boulder were crushing her chest, suffocating her. She stepped outside and immediately called Alfred. It took a while before he picked up. "Where are you?" Deirdre gripped her phone, her voice weary. Silence lingered on the other end before a reply came. "Sorry, I'm busy, I'll come over later." Deirdre could only feel the absurdity of it all. "You don't need to come." She hung up abruptly, taking a deep breath to suppress the ache in her heart. After a short while, the phone vibrated again. Deirdre opened the WeChat interface, only to find a link sent by Elsa. She clicked the link. The video showed behind-the-scenes footage of Alfred's interview. "We've heard Mr. Alfred has been married for 5 years. If you were to describe your marriage in one sentence, what would it be?" Alfred pondered for a moment and hesitated no more. "It's a contract." "Haha, Mr. Alfred, you do have a sense of humor. How could marriage be a contract?" Alfred remained serious nonetheless. "When passion fades, all that remains in marriage is duty. And what is bound by duty if not a contract?" He fell silent for a moment before continuing. "My only regret now is that this contract has no expiration date." Elsa's message came swiftly and urgently. What does he mean by this? Does he want to end the marriage? Elsa was still cursing at Alfred. Deirdre opened the video, where a few particularly eye-catching comments stood out beneath it. "Haha, isn't it obvious? He just fell out of love. When will my husband be single again? I'll be the first to sign up." Deirdre slowly scrolled through the screen, her expression gradually darkening. Alfred came back late again that day. When he entered the room, Deirdre wasn't asleep. She lay silently in bed, soon feeling the mattress dip beside her. Alfred just fell asleep like that. Deirdre opened her eyes again, carefully turned over, and let her gaze linger on his profile, unable to sleep. When the weekend came, Deirdre went to see Deirdre's mom, the doctor she had arranged for her. The doctor carefully examined the lab report and suddenly furrowed his brow. "I recommend avoiding pregnancy for the next few years." Deirdre's heart sank. "Why?" The doctor sighed. "You didn't recover properly from the after-effects of your previous uterine curettage procedure. Getting pregnant won't be easy." Deirdre suddenly remembered that after her miscarriage years ago, she had barely followed up with any checkups, partly due to her busy legal practice, partly because she had deliberately avoided facing it. "What if I really want to get pregnant?" The doctor looked up in surprise and told her frankly, "There's an absolute probability you wouldn't survive the delivery table." Deirdre left the hospital in a daze. She couldn't accept this outcome. With Deirdre's mom's words flashing incessantly through her mind, how long could their relationship truly last without a child? Deirdre sat on the park bench, her usually strong demeanor finally revealing a trace of vulnerability. After much hesitation, she dialed Alfred's number. The phone was answered quickly, Deirdre's voice uncontrollably hoarse. "Where are you?" "Outside." "What's wrong?" "I have something to tell you." Deirdre paused mid-sentence, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Alfred stood not far away, a woman holding a child's hand beside him. At this moment, Deirdre felt all her words stuck in her throat. "Daddy." A crisp child's voice suddenly came through the phone. Deirdre saw Alfred ahead chuckle softly and pat the child's head, yet his voice through the receiver remained as impassive as ever. "Speak if you have something to say." "All right, let's talk face to face then." Deirdre hung up the phone, clenched it tightly, and walked toward the two. Alfred turned around instinctively and froze as well, but he quickly regained his composure and introduced to Deirdre, "This is my client, Juliet." Deirdre ignored him, sizing up the woman before her, dressed in a white dress, with long straight hair and a timid, gentle expression. Deirdre politely raised a smile. "Hello, I'm Deirdre. You can call me Mrs. Brandon." Her outstretched hand was ignored, left hanging awkwardly in the air. Juliet shrank back, hiding behind Alfred. Her child also hid behind Alfred, only half of their face peeking out, looking timidly at Deirdre. Alfred immediately furrowed his brows, shielding the two behind him, his tone turning icy. "What do you want?" "I have things to do." This absurd scene left Deirdre at a loss for how to react in the moment. Finally, she could only muster the strength to say, "I need to speak with you alone." "Then go home, I'll see them back first." Alfred didn't seem to mind, taking the child's hand as he walked away. Deirdre stood there motionless, watching her husband escort another woman home. That evening, Deirdre waited in the living room the entire time. Time passed minute by minute. She took out her phone and called Alfred, but no one answered. Alfred didn't return all night. Deirdre didn't sleep all night. The next day, she forced herself to go to the courthouse and received a new case file. As she opened the file, the first page clearly displayed the plaintiff's name, Juliet. The nature of the case was a domestic violence divorce lawsuit. Divorce cases weren't uncommon. Alfred was the defense attorney, and she knew it. But recalling the scene she witnessed yesterday, Deirdre couldn't help feeling uneasy. Confirm the case filing, contact the plaintiff, and appear in court on time tomorrow. Deirdre briefly assigned the tasks, then hesitated for a moment before finally deciding to make the call. "Alfred, Juliet's case is with me now. Please have DS assign another lawyer to follow up." She delivered the routine notice, only to hear Alfred's tone instantly sharpen on the other end. "Did you deliberately request to take this case?" Deirdre froze, an indescribable sense of absurdity washing over her. Her own voice hardened in response. "What possible reason would I have to do that?" The other end of the line fell silent. After a long pause, Alfred finally said, "I'll recuse myself. But I also hope my relationship with Juliet won't affect your ability to make the right judgment." With that, he hung up. Deirdre felt a chill run through her body, unable to snap out of it for a long time. One day later during the court investigation, the new lawyer led Juliet to the petition room. Deirdre, sitting beside the intern responsible for documentation, spoke first. "As per procedure, we'll begin with pre-trial mediation for you." Juliet suddenly became agitated upon hearing this and shouted at Deirdre, "Mrs. Brandon, why can't you just grant me the divorce directly?" Deirdre frowned. "Please address me as Your Honor. This is part of the litigation procedure and cannot be omitted." Juliet's expression changed instantly, her eyes turning red as she whispered plaintively, "You're not still concerned about my relationship with your husband, are you?" In an instant, everyone present turned their gaze toward Deirdre. Under the weight of various peculiar stares, Deirdre clenched her fists, yet her tone remained composed. "So according to what you're saying, can I understand that my husband had an affair within your marriage, which led you to file for divorce?" Deirdre spoke, her tone taking on an edge. "Please answer." Juliet's expression changed, her eyes flashing with resentment before instantly transforming into hurt. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing bruises on her arm, her eyes brimming with tears. "Your Honor, the reason I'm filing for divorce is that my husband has been physically abusive towards me, Mr. Alfred was just taking pity on us mother and child. You can't confuse right and wrong simply because we have a close relationship." Deirdre was left speechless. Throughout the entire evidence collection process, Juliet kept sobbing without pause. After everyone had left, the intern hesitated to depart. Still clutching the recording device, Deirdre looked up at him, exhaustion finally surfacing in her eyes. "It's fine, just record the truth as it is." When the 15-day public notice period ended, Juliet's husband also came to the mediation room. The moment the man saw Juliet, He pointed at her and shouted, "How dare you still have the nerve to accuse me of domestic violence? I raised that bastard of yours for years without a word, and now you want a divorce?" Juliet hid behind the lawyer, her expression timid and shrinking. "Want a divorce? Fine." The man slammed the table. "You leave with nothing. I won't give you a single cent," Juliet exclaimed agitatedly. "How can you not give me any money?" Deirdre rubbed her temples, looking somewhat helpless. "You claim the domestic violence was fabricated by her, then present the evidence. Now, go back and wait for further notice." Deirdre was just packing up the case files to leave when Juliet made a call right in front of her. "Mr. Alfred," Juliet burst into tears the moment the call connected. "Please save me. The judge misunderstood our relationship. She wouldn't listen to a word I said. It's all right. Let me explain." Alfred's gentle voice came through the phone speaker. "Please, Mr. Alfred, respect the recusal principle. She has a lawyer. It's not your place to explain things to me." Deirdre couldn't help interjecting. Alfred's voice instantly turned ice cold. "Rest assured, Your Honor," with just one sentence. The call was abruptly ended. Deirdre's surging sorrow quietly overwhelmed her at this moment, while Alfred's words pierced her heart like a sharp knife. The legal assistant took over the follow-up work as Deirdre left in silence. When Deirdre stepped out of the courthouse, a fellow judge suddenly exclaimed, "Judge, isn't that your husband? My goodness, he actually came to pick you up." Deirdre looked over and saw Alfred standing by the car, gazing at her with that same aloof expression. All the struggles and anguish of these past days seemed to vanish in that instant. "Hush now, I'm heading home first." Deirdre couldn't help but let a smile tug at her lips as she lifted her foot to step toward Alfred. A delicate fragrance brushed past her as someone walked by. Deirdre only saw Juliet fluttering toward Alfred like a butterfly. "Mr. Alfred, you really came to pick me up?" Alfred didn't spare another glance at Deirdre, driving away without hesitation. Deirdre could feel her colleagues' sympathetic gazes burning into her back, could hear their hushed whispers. Her hands clenched tightly in that moment, knuckles turning white, yet she could only force herself to maintain composure, raising a smile as she politely bid farewell to the others. Only when she returned home did she find the empty room completely silent. She didn't turn on the lights. Sitting on the sofa with reddened eyes, Alfred returned home to complete darkness. He turned on the light and only then saw Deirdre on the sofa. Frowning, he asked, "Why didn't you turn on the light?" No one answered. Alfred frowned, his tone serious. "We need to talk properly." Deirdre seemed to awaken only then, a ripple of emotion crossing her pale face. She seemed genuinely curious as she asked, "Talk about what?" "About the relationship between you and your former client." Alfred tugged impatiently at his tie and said coldly, "Can't you speak properly?" Deirdre curled her lips into a faint smile and looked at him calmly. "Then what would you like to say?" Alfred took a deep breath, walked over to Deirdre, and half knelt before her. "Juliet and her husband have no feelings left. What's the point of forcing them to stay together if they won't get divorced?" Deirdre felt her heart tremble. Was this what he wanted to discuss with her? Other women? Deirdre forced a self-deprecating smile and suddenly asked softly, "What about us? Do we still have feelings for each other?" Alfred immediately stood up, his demeanor turning icy. "We're talking about the case now." Deirdre flushed again, her smile carrying endless bitterness. "Yes, talking about the case, that's all that's left between us now." She took a deep breath and exhaled the turbid air. "So all I can tell you is that I'll follow procedure." Alfred's expression turned completely icy. Without another word, he entered the study. The two spent the night in silence. The next day, Deirdre had just arrived at the courthouse when a court assistant handed her a case file. "Your Honor, the parties in the mediated divorce case are waiting for you in the conference room." Deirdre instantly recalled this case. A decade of marriage had left both parties emotionally estranged, prompting the husband to file for divorce. Deirdre nodded and entered the conference room. The man and woman sat at opposite ends of the negotiation table, each accompanied by their lawyer. "What are your current intentions?" Deirdre asked as usual. "Split the assets 50-50, the woman's lawyer stated. The man's lawyer added, "Premarital assets don't count." Both sides tacitly accepted this outcome. Deirdre signed the agreement and handed it to the two of them. The woman was the first to rise and leave, but at the moment she stepped out the door, she turned back to look at the man. "Do you regret marrying me?" The man replied coldly, "Had I known this would be the outcome, I wouldn't have married you." The woman's eyes reddened as she left resolutely, never looking back. Deirdre paused her note-taking as the woman's current anguish seemed to surge into her own heart as well. Even a decade-long marriage can reach its end. Then what future awaits her and Alfred? After work, Deirdre found herself unwilling to return home. wandering aimlessly. She somehow ended up at the city's largest family amusement park. Deirdre sat on the small wooden horse, her gaze drifting aimlessly. In the distance, a familiar man held a child's hand, carefully helping them onto the slide. Deirdre's tears finally fell at this moment. She watched alone for a long time, but without disturbing the harmony of the scene, turned and dialed Deirdre's mom's number, her voice carrying unprecedented resolve. "Mom, I'm coming to get that fertility medicine you mentioned last time." Deirdre opened the package and swallowed the pills. A bitter, almost unbearable taste spread across her tongue, yet she forced it down. When Alfred returned home, Deirdre approached him eagerly and spoke without hesitation. "Let's have another child." Alfred looked at her in surprise, his brows tightly furrowed. "I remember we just agreed last year to prioritize work." Having said that, he turned to enter the house without a second thought. Deirdre felt her heart clench violently. She stepped forward to grab him, an involuntary edge of insistence creeping into her tone as she pressed. "I just need your stance on this. Are we having a child or not?" Alfred suddenly turned around, sizing her up. In the next instant, his gaze shot like an icy arrow, laced with the most venomous words. "Not having one. Have it yourself if you want." Alfred finished speaking and walked straight into the study. Deirdre stood frozen in place, tears streaming down her cheeks. Alfred did not emerge from the study, leaving her to sleep alone yet again tonight. A few days later, it was time for Juliet's case mediation once more. Deirdre had barely set foot on the courthouse steps when Juliet charged toward her and, before the eyes of all present, suddenly dropped to her knees. "Your Honor, the judge. Please show mercy and proceed with the trial directly. Don't make this harder for me." Deirdre, startled, quickly reached out to pull her, but failed to move her. Hearing the murmurs from the crowd, she frowned tightly. "I'm not making things difficult for you. All procedures now are lawful and compliant." Juliet had reddened eyes, her voice soft and full of grievance. "Alfred likes me and my son. That's not something I can control." Juliet's irrelevant response sent a wave of icy anger coursing through Deirdre's heart. Deirdre glared at her coldly. "Let me say it again, whatever relationship the two of you have, it won't affect my professional ethics as a judge." With that, she turned to enter the courthouse, but Juliet grabbed her hand once more. "Then take pity on me and let Alfred defend me instead. Both my child and I need his help." Deirdre no longer wanted to engage with her and shook off her hand abruptly, causing Juliet to fall to the ground. Just then, Deirdre heard a familiar voice behind her. "Deirdre, what are you doing?" Deirdre turned around. She saw Alfred stride forward, helping Juliet to her feet, his eyes filled with icy coldness as he looked at her. Deirdre watched him tightly gripping Juliet's hand, waves of pain surging through her heart. Meanwhile, Juliet immediately clung to Alfred's arm, tears welling in her eyes. "Alfred, I just wanted to apologize to the judge. I didn't know she hated me this much." Alfred cast a cold glance at Deirdre. "I hadn't realized you'd grown so high and mighty in your position." Deirdre felt as if her heart were being torn apart, yet she forced her face to remain composed. "What are you doing here?" "He came here as my friend. Surely that doesn't violate any rules," Juliet immediately said timidly, glancing at Alfred. He remained silent, clearly acquiescing. Deirdre gave a bitter smile, said no more, and turned to enter the courthouse. Soon after, the second mediation officially began. Yet unexpectedly, Juliet's husband refused to attend this meeting. While his lawyer presented the paternity test results before everyone, Juliet's marital infidelity was confirmed. Deirdre couldn't help but glance at Alfred, only to see him busy comforting the horrified Juliet. No one knew how much effort Deirdre had exerted to maintain her composure. She withdrew her gaze and signed her name on the mediation agreement. The mediation failed. Both parties' demands remain unchanged. Court date to be scheduled. As she left the courthouse, Deirdre saw Alfred supporting the limp Juliet as they walked away, not daring to look any longer, afraid that in the next moment, the one collapsing would be herself. Since becoming a judge, Deirdre for the first time worked late into the night before returning home. The study door was tightly locked. With the constant sound of keyboard typing coming from inside, Alfred had already returned. After a moment of hesitation, Deirdre stepped forward and knocked on the door. The typing sound promptly ceased. Deirdre suddenly couldn't suppress the welling sorrow, her voice trembling slightly. "Alfred, I need to talk to you." But the door remained unopened, the inside completely silent. Deirdre took a deep breath, her voice unconsciously pleading. "Do you know why I stepped back from the front lines? Those years, did you ever count how many times we actually sat down to eat together? I'm trying hard to come back to the family, hoping you'd notice me more. If you can't go on like this, just tell me directly. Let's stop torturing each other like this." Deirdre stared at the still tightly shut door, her heart shrouded in deep disappointment. She was about to leave, but at that moment, the door suddenly opened. Deirdre looked up in surprise, only to see Alfred holding his suit jacket with indifferent eyes. "There's new progress in Juliet's case. I'm heading to the law firm." As the door closed, his voice was low but still as heartless as ever. "Don't wait up, I won't be back tonight." The empty house, the pale lighting making Deirdre's face appear even whiter. She stood there for who knows how long. Suddenly, a piercing phone ring shattered the silence. Deirdre felt her heart tremble as she answered instinctively. Deirdre's mom's voice echoed through the empty house. "Deirdre, have you taken your medicine? How's the effect? You should go to the hospital for a checkup." Deirdre listened in silence. The rope binding that heavy stone in her heart suddenly snapped, her eyes reddened. Amid Deirdre's mom's endless chatter, Deirdre suddenly spoke up. "Mom, I don't want to have this baby." The air seemed to freeze for a second. Deirdre's mom's voice suddenly turned shrill. "Deirdre, why do you think I'm forcing you to have a child? How long has it been since Alfred last came home with you?" It felt like a hammer blow, shattering Deirdre's long-maintained shell of self-deception. "If you don't have children, do you want to end up like me, divorced? Don't you understand what happens without your own flesh and blood?" Deirdre's mom spoke softly, yet with a chilling tone. Deirdre could sense her self-mockery and anguish in that moment, a pain that had fermented and now coiled like a noose around Deirdre's neck. It suddenly choked her. She was an adopted child. The year she was adopted, Deirdre's mom was still married. Deirdre knew from the beginning that her existence was merely a means for the infertile Deirdre's mom to salvage the marriage. Yet things didn't get better. 2 years later, Deirdre's mom still got divorced, and that man never appeared again. "Mom," Deirdre's voice grew hoarse, "you're on your own now." Deirdre's mom left just these words before hanging up. Deirdre's eyes were red-rimmed. Even her hand holding the phone began trembling slightly. Is having children really necessary between a married couple? Will having a biological child solve all problems? She didn't know the answer, but at this moment, all that welled up inside her was endless confusion. After that, Deirdre spent all her days in the courthouse, as if fleeing from something unknown, until one weekend, the originally scheduled Lawyer Pioneers Conference, set for a month later, was suddenly moved up. Several previously confirmed lawyers couldn't adjust their schedules, so the organizers simply invited the court to join the event. Deirdre rushed to the neighboring city the same day after receiving the court's notice. Upon arriving at the venue, she immediately saw lawyers gathered together, engaged in heated discussions. The man at the center of the discussion remained expressionless, showing not a flicker of change even when Deirdre suddenly appeared. Deirdre approached and heard Alfred speaking eloquently. "Excessive interference from marriage law restricts personal freedom. Even if it protects the rights of the majority, we must not overlook those who feel shackled by it." His views on marriage law were somewhat harsh, but most of the lawyers present supported him. Deirdre felt a sudden fire ignite within her. She stepped forward, her gaze resolute. Legal norms can effectively protect the rights and interests of both parties in a marriage. If everyone demands freedom without responsibility, what would this world become? Deirdre's sudden remark left everyone present in brief silence. Alfred looked over and replied without hesitation. "So should the law simply ignore the rights of this minority?" His words stood on moral high ground. Deirdre found herself at a loss for words. The atmosphere in the room suddenly grew tense. The senior quickly tried to lighten the mood, patting Alfred on the shoulder. "All right. What's going on with you two? It's just casual talk. No need to make it feel like an argument." Another senior chimed in. "Come on. Couples quarrel at night and make up by morning. You two better reconcile tonight." Deirdre remained silent, but Alfred reached out to take her bag. "Follow me." It was only then that Deirdre realized they had been assigned to share a room. Deirdre couldn't refuse and had no choice but to follow closely behind, entering the room. No sooner had they entered the room than Alfred quickly took out his laptop and got straight to work. In the cramped room, Deirdre could hear nothing but her own rapid breathing. She felt there was almost no way left to avoid it. She sat down on the edge of the bed with her back to him, closed her eyes briefly, and spoke slowly. "I've decided not to have children." As soon as the words left her mouth, Alfred paused what he was doing. His eyes flashed with momentary surprise before transforming into profound mockery. "Yeah, not having children is great. Otherwise, what if you got pregnant and then accidentally lost it? A child's birth should at least have a mother who loves them." The faint sarcasm in his tone made Deirdre instantly turn deathly pale. She never expected him to suddenly bring up that child, the child she lost just after becoming pregnant due to overexertion. If he were still here, he would be 5 years old now. Deirdre felt an overwhelming sadness spreading through her. Just as she was about to say something, Alfred had already swiftly returned to his work demeanor, as if that momentary lapse had been nothing more than a fleeting illusion. "Forget it, I don't want to talk about this anymore." Deirdre could see his silent resistance, feeling only that the air in the room had grown even thinner. Deirdre stood up awkwardly. "I should go." Alfred did not respond. Nor did he show any concern about her leaving alone late at night. Deirdre could no longer bear his indifference and turned to leave the hotel. Only a few small street lamps illuminated the path near the hotel. Deirdre carefully used the dim light to check the route to another hotel on her phone, but just then, her phone suddenly rang. The call had just connected when the intern's panicked voice came through. "Something terrible has happened. You need to check Twitter's trending topics right now." Deirdre opened Twitter and her pupils constricted sharply upon seeing the top trending topic. Top trending, female judge reported by single mother. She's the disgrace of the legal profession. Upon opening it, there was Juliet herself recording and uploading a video. In the video, Juliet had deep tear stains on her pale face as she continuously lamented the unfair treatment she had suffered. "My child is only 5 years old. Forcing us mother and daughter to leave with nothing is practically sending us to our deaths." Juliet spoke as tears rolled down, evoking an irresistible sense of pity. "Besides, my husband had already accepted this child. It's all because of this judge stirring up trouble that my husband insists on divorcing me." Juliet's words struck a chord with netizens, and everyone started commenting and sharing. "This judge is called Deirdre. She climbed to the position of chief judge at such a young age, must have used quite a few tricks. I heard that Deirdre and her husband don't have a very happy marriage. Only a psychopath could do something like this. How can someone like this be a judge? Deirdre, get out of the judiciary." It was just a video without any evidence, yet it was filled with nothing but malice and insults directed at her. Deirdre refreshed Twitter, her fingers trembling slightly. She forced herself to calm down, but just then, a message from the court came through. "Business trip suspended. Return immediately." Deirdre's heart skipped a beat as she quickly booked a high-speed train back. Early the next morning, Deirdre arrived at the courthouse. From a distance, the courthouse entrance was bustling with noise as a few people held up red banners, shouting themselves hoarse. "Deirdre, get out of the courthouse. The court doesn't need this kind of trash." Deirdre frowned tightly and pulled her mask tighter. "Deirdre is here. There she is." A rough male voice suddenly rang out. Deirdre looked up to see the group waving banners as they quickly approached her, their faces alight with excitement, looking every bit determined to defend the purity of the legal profession. Deirdre was instantly surrounded by them, jostled and cursed at by the crowd. She could only cover her head, helplessly trying to protect herself. It wasn't until security arrived that they pulled her out of the crowd and escorted her into the courthouse. After sitting in the courthouse lobby for quite some time, Deirdre's pale complexion finally looked less dreadful. The courthouse's Dean Carl also came to see her, saying upon meeting her, "Deirdre, we all believe you wouldn't do such a thing." Deirdre felt a wave of relief, but Dean Carl immediately continued, however, with public outrage running too high. "We have no choice but to address the public opinion first." His face showed deep helplessness. "The court's current position is to have you temporarily suspended. After the public sentiment subsides, you'll be transferred to a local court." Deirdre felt a surge of intense resentment in her heart, but she also knew this was the best way to quell the storm. Deirdre clenched her hands tightly, then finally let them fall limp. "I understand. Thank you, Dean." Dean Carl sighed softly. "It's not advisable for you to appear in court right now. I've assigned someone else to handle your case. Take these days to rest properly." Deirdre knew this wasn't the right time to speak, so she had no choice but to leave through the courthouse side door. The moment she stepped out of the courthouse, Deirdre Twitter's special notification alert chimed. The court's Twitter account posted a new Twitter, "Judge Deirdre of this court, for violating court discipline, with the court's approval. All duties of Deirdre are suspended effective immediately." A belated wave of sorrow washed over her. Deirdre struggled to steady her breathing, yet still couldn't stop her eyes from reddening. She knew that even if the court eventually gave her a fair outcome in this matter, in the eyes of the public, she would forever be nailed to the pillar of shame. Deirdre returned home in a daze. Just as she fumbled for her keys, the front door swung open. Alfred stood holding documents. Clearly on his way out, the two stared at each other in silence. Deirdre froze, her gaze locking onto the file cover, Juliet Case Transfer Authorization. Deirdre felt a sudden pang in her heart. She abruptly stepped forward, shutting the door behind her. Alfred immediately stepped back, gathering the documents. His voice uncharacteristically gentle. Are you all right? A surge of bitterness welled up in her chest. Deirdre asked hoarsely, did you watch the video? Alfred remained silent for a moment before saying, I'll persuade Juliet to delete that video. She just wanted so badly to break free from that terrible marriage. The video was posted in a moment of impulse. I apologize on her behalf. At that instant, Deirdre felt her heart tear apart with excruciating pain. The man before her suddenly seemed like a complete stranger, as she gazed at Alfred's sharply defined features. All she could picture was the tender young man at their wedding, the one whose eyes had reddened with emotion the moment she said I do. He was gone, the one who had loved her deeply, vanished without her knowing when. Alfred, I won't accept this. Deirdre heard her own icy voice, her lips pressed together stubbornly, and I won't allow you to take her case again. Alfred looked utterly astonished, then frowned again. Unreasonable. Deirdre ignored his coldness, her voice trembling as she demanded, what if I insist on being unreasonable? Alfred remained silent for a moment before turning sideways to leave. Deirdre felt the surging grief within her suddenly burst its banks. She didn't turn around, only asking calmly and deliberately, word by word, Alfred, do you want a divorce? It should be you who's wanted a divorce for a long time now. After a long silence, Alfred instead let out a cold snort, even the corners of his eyes brimming with sarcasm. Deirdre, startled, turned around, only to see the door he had slammed shut behind him. Deirdre stood frozen, staring fixedly at the door, her bloodless lips tightly clenched. She knew she was already standing on the precipice of her marriage. Either she would fall off herself, or be mercilessly pushed by the one she loved most on that cliff. Juliet's case reached a conclusion a week later. The fact of her marital infidelity was established. Yet she still received a substantial sum because the child was awarded to her. But this outcome wasn't covered by the media. What flooded the internet remained the torrent of abuse directed at Deirdre. Juliet's video wasn't taken down either, still prominently pinned at the top. Deirdre tried to distract herself from it all by gathering her things to visit Deirdre's mom. Mom, everything online is fake. Don't worry about it, Deirdre said cautiously. Deirdre's mom shot her a glance and said irritably, why would I worry about that? You might as well quit your job and come home to focus on preparing for pregnancy. Deirdre felt a chill run through her body. Is that all you care about? Deirdre's mom waved her hand dismissively. The only thing you need to think about now is how to get pregnant with Alfred's child. Deirdre wanted to say more, but the impatient Deirdre's mom directly shoved her out the door. She stood at the doorstep, silent for a long time. Shortly after leaving Deirdre's mom's house, Deirdre suddenly stopped in her tracks as she walked. She felt someone had been following her all along. Deirdre's heart instantly leaped into her throat, and she frantically called Alfred. After a few rings, Deirdre hurriedly said, Alfred, I. The next moment, the call was abruptly disconnected. Deirdre felt a shudder in her heart and hurriedly dialed again, but the call now showed no answer. Before she could react, she lowered her head to dial 110, but the sound of approaching footsteps suddenly closed in behind her. Deirdre whirled around and found a middle-aged man, about 40 years old. The man, realizing he'd been spotted, swaggered forward brazenly, his eyes brimming with unconcealed malice. Deirdre clenched her fists. Who are you? What do you want? The middle-aged man actually pulled out a small knife. Who am I? I'm someone whose family you ruined with your verdict, you disgrace of a judge. Brandishing the knife, he lunged forward. How dare you grant the divorce just because I cheated? What man doesn't stray? It's busybody bitches like you who cause all the trouble. Deirdre felt nothing but despair flooding her heart. She instinctively raised her hands above her head in defense, but the anticipated pain never came. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her with one swift shoulder throw. The man was slammed to the ground. Police station. Deirdre sat at the interrogation table, still shaken. The officer who saved her life handed her a steaming cup of water, his tone cool. Next time you're in danger, remember to call 911 first. He cast an indifferent glance at Deirdre and sat down across from her. Deirdre took the water, the scalding heat slowly soothing her unsettled heart. She gave a bitter smile and nodded in agreement, saying, all right, thank you, officer, yes. Why did you call Alfred first when in danger? What a foolish thing to do. The officer glanced up at her, opened a notebook beside him, wrote down a string of numbers, tore off the page, and handed it to her. 911 isn't always that prompt. Calling me directly would be better. Deirdre looked up in surprise. For a moment, she thought the person before her looked somewhat familiar, yet couldn't be certain. The officer showed no sign of surprise. I'll take you home to rest. Deirdre returned home in a daze by police car, and it was already late at night when she arrived. She sat on the sofa, utterly distraught. As the door creaked, Alfred walked toward the study with a thick stack of case files in hand. Deirdre suddenly stood up, her eyes slightly reddened as she stared at the other person. "Why did you hang up on me?" Alfred remained expressionless, his profile cold, not even pausing in his steps. Deirdre felt an even greater wave of panic rise in her heart. She took a few steps forward and grabbed Alfred's hand. When she spoke again, Deirdre realized her voice had already turned hoarse. "You know Her voice trembled with unshed tears, her demeanor now reduced to utter humility. "Deirdre," Alfred cut her off with a frown, his face clearly etched with impatience. "I don't want to know what just happened to you. I'm exhausted and just want to sleep." His gaze remained indifferent, showing no trace of pity despite Deirdre's current disheveled state. Deirdre fell silent and wordlessly released her grip. Alfred didn't hesitate to start closing the door. Deirdre stood frozen, her eyes heavy with sorrow, yet she suddenly spoke up the moment the door was about to shut. "Alfred," Deirdre called out. Alfred turned to look at her. She clutched the door frame tightly, her voice trembling. "You promised me when you proposed that we'd always be each other's one and only. Does that still mean anything?" Alfred remained expressionless as he pried Deirdre's fingers away one by one. "It's been too long. I don't remember." Deirdre had no choice but to let go, watching helplessly as the door closed in her face. Deirdre finally broke down in tears before the closed door. The door never opened. In the familiar law firm setting, Deirdre sat across from her former senior colleague. Between them lay a freshly printed divorce agreement. The senior colleague gazed at Deirdre and sighed deeply. Such a golden model couple of the firm, how did it come to this? Deirdre did not answer, because even she herself did not understand. She forced a smile, packed up the documents, and immediately chose same-day delivery to send them over. At the moment when the dust settled, Deirdre felt an endless void in her heart. Immediately, Deirdre lowered her head and sent a WeChat message to Alfred. "The divorce agreement will arrive shortly. Sign it and mail it back." While waiting for Alfred's reply, it was actually the court that responded first. "Your appeal regarding Juliet's online defamation case has been transferred to the police by the court. Also, after discussion, it was finally decided to transfer you to the neighboring Jiangsu province. You'll start in 3 days." Deirdre closed her phone, her mind filled with countless chaotic thoughts. This made her heart repeatedly rise and sink. Ding dong. The message arrived again. Deirdre quickly opened WeChat. It was Alfred's reply. "Okay, just 2 simple words." Deirdre instantly dropped her phone, sitting frozen in place as her already swollen eyes quietly reddened again. At the same time, DS law firm, Alfred was working at his desk. His brows were furrowed with anxiety as he typed and deleted messages repeatedly, until his secretary placed a package on his desk. Alfred hesitated for a long moment before opening the file, as expected. It was the divorce papers she had sent. Alfred read word by word until reaching the final page's reason for divorce column, where the stark black letters declared, "Irretrievable breakdown of marriage." Alfred unconsciously repeated aloud, "Irretrievable breakdown of marriage." His face darkened completely at those 4 words. This was an extremely fair divorce agreement, so fair that the person who wrote it seemed utterly devoid of any lingering attachment. Alfred clutched the agreement tightly. Veins bulging on the back of his hand, he let out a derisive laugh, then snatched up a pen as if venting his anger, swiftly signed his name, and summoned his secretary to have it mailed out immediately. He didn't hesitate for a single moment throughout the entire process. Alfred stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and lit a cigarette. Amidst the swirling smoke, his expression was unreadable. Suddenly, his phone rang. Alfred lit up and quickly answered the call. "Hello. Is this Deirdre's husband?" It was an unfamiliar woman's voice, and Alfred's expression immediately turned indifferent. "Yes, what is it?" The other party quickly replied. "This is the police station. We couldn't reach your wife by phone, but there's new progress in the defamation case, so we're notifying you." "What defamation case?" Alfred asked in astonishment. "Please go on." As the other party began speaking at length, Alfred's hand gradually clenched tighter over time. "The case regarding Juliet spreading rumors about your wife Deirdre has been investigated by our police department, and we've confirmed she personally orchestrated everything. She hired internet trolls, bought trending topics, and used fake accounts to personally attack Deirdre. Additionally, the people who caused disturbances in front of the courthouse and those who assaulted your wife on the street have all confessed to being instructed by her. All involved parties have now been apprehended with irrefutable evidence. When can you come in to give your statement?" Alfred clutched his phone tightly, overwhelmed by a wave of sheer panic. "I'll discuss it with my wife and get back to you later." With those words left hanging, Alfred hurriedly hung up the phone and turned to walk out of the office. The secretary, seated at her workstation, immediately stood up upon seeing Alfred emerge. Alfred strode over, his expression betraying unconcealed panic. "Where are the documents I just asked you to deliver?" The secretary widened her eyes, looking utterly innocent. "Oh, that document, it was sent out 10 minutes ago." Alfred froze for a moment, confusion rising in his heart. He stood silently in place, showing no reaction for a long while. The secretary cautiously asked, "Mr. Alfred, is there anything else you need?" Alfred suddenly snapped out of it and gave a self-deprecating smile. "No, carry on with your work." With that, Alfred returned to his office. Alfred sat on the chair, the police officer's words still echoing in his mind. Suddenly, he took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, Attorney Fang. Deirdre, did she come to you for divorce consultation?" Alfred's face remained hidden in the shadows, his expression unreadable. "I'm coming to see you now." "She's gone. Doesn't matter. I'm here for you." Alfred hung up the phone, grabbed his coat from the side, and walked straight out. Meanwhile, Deirdre arrived at the courthouse to collect her remaining belongings. From the moment Deirdre stepped into the courthouse, people around her kept casting strange glances her way. That gaze didn't become restrained with the conclusion of the case. Instead, it grew more intense day by day, with no latest updates from the police regarding the defamation case. Deirdre had no choice but to swallow her pride and offer no explanation. Arriving in front of her office, Deirdre knocked on the door, but there was no response. Deirdre had no choice but to push the door open and enter. The furnishings inside remained exactly as they were when I last left. Deirdre took a cardboard box from the side and packed a few of her belongings. Just then, the door suddenly swung open. The court assistant entered the room with an unfamiliar man. When she saw Deirdre, she suddenly became awkward. "Judge, you're here." Deirdre looked curiously at the newcomer and asked, "And this is?" The court assistant hesitated to speak. The man, however, had a cheerful disposition and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm the newly transferred judge. My surname is Chen." Deirdre finally understood the source of the court assistant's unusual behavior. Deirdre gave Judge Chen a generous smile and extended her hand. "Hello, I'm Deirdre, pleased to meet you." Judge Chen paused momentarily before reaching out to shake her hand, his expression betraying a hint of unease. Deirdre gestured toward the cardboard box by the table with a smile. "My things aren't fully packed yet. Perhaps you'd like to look around elsewhere first." Deirdre's words rescued the silent legal assistant beside her. The legal assistant was quite young. Though she had only worked with Deirdre for a year, they had developed a deep bond. At this moment, her eyes reddened as she nodded and looked at Judge Chen beside her. "Judge Chen, there are still so many places we haven't visited. For example, that's our staff cafeteria over there. I can take you to get a meal card right now." Judge Chen nodded, and the two closed the door together before leaving in turn. Waiting until the door was completely shut, Deirdre's eyes also reddened. She stood there for a long moment before finally regaining her composure, after tidying up for what felt like ages. Deirdre finally noticed, apart from case files, the personal belongings in this office that truly belonged to her were pitifully few. She had initially worried about not being able to move everything at once, but it turned out she couldn't even fill a single cardboard box. Deirdre let out a sigh, lifted the cardboard box, and walked out of the courtroom. As she approached the courthouse entrance, Deirdre paused mid-step. She turned back to gaze at this hallowed court. Her heart filled with indescribable emotions. The people coming and going were all rushing about for the sake of legal justice, while she was being forced to leave because someone had trampled on the law with impunity. If one day, she could return to this place again, then it must be a return that is utterly pure and without the slightest blemish. Deirdre had just set down the cardboard box in her hands when the doorbell suddenly rang. Deirdre opened the door to find a local courier. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he handed over the document pouch, unable to resist complaining. "Miss, could you check your phone occasionally? I've been calling you for half an hour downstairs with no answer." Deirdre, startled, pulled out her phone only to find it had already powered off. Deirdre apologized repeatedly. "So sorry about that. I'll be more careful next time." After seeing the visitor out, Deirdre sat on the sofa and opened the document envelope. A thin string had been wound around the bag about 10 times. Deirdre calmly untied it, took out the contents, and flipped directly to the last page. His signature appeared prominently in the signature field. Deirdre's eyes instantly reddened as she clutched the document tightly. After a long while, Deirdre's breathing gradually steadied. She closed the file and set it aside. Then Deirdre picked up the charger and plugged in her phone. The phone booted up slowly, and the moment the screen lit up, Multiple missed calls popped up simultaneously. Among the unfamiliar numbers, there was unexpectedly a missed call from Alfred. Deirdre swiped her finger past Alfred's name without pausing, dialing the adjacent call record instead. The phone call connected. "Hello, hi," Deirdre asked. "May I ask what this is about?" The person on the other end sounded extremely excited. "Is this Deirdre? Your phone finally went through." Deirdre puzzledly moved the phone away from her ear, carefully checking the number to confirm she'd never seen it before. "Sorry, my phone ran out of battery." The other party responded promptly, saying quickly, "This is the police station. I've already explained the details to your husband. When would you be available to come to the station to give your statement?" Deirdre frowned and gripped her phone tightly. "What did you say to my husband?" Deirdre felt an inexplicable unease stirring in her heart. "I couldn't get through to your phone. But there's progress in that defamation case. I had to notify you somehow. See, right after speaking with your husband, you got the call, didn't you?" The voice on the other end even carried a hint of cheerfulness. Deirdre lowered her eyes, a bitter smile flickering at the corners of her mouth. Now she finally understood Alfred's reason for making that phone call to her. It might have been yet another plea on behalf of Juliet. Deirdre let out a deep sigh and said to the person on the phone, "I'll be right there." After hesitating for a moment, she finally spoke up. "Also, I'm currently going through divorce proceedings with that person. From now on, there's no need to inform him about matters concerning me." With that, Deirdre hung up the phone, her worries surfacing in that moment. Deirdre wasted no more time, put on her coat, and stepped out again. In just over 10 minutes, Deirdre arrived at the police station. The woman taking notes at the police station entrance stood up as soon as she saw Deirdre, a faint blush appearing on her face. "Hello, I'm the operator who just spoke with you on the phone, Linda. I'm sorry, I didn't know you and your husband weren't getting along. I hope I'm not causing you any trouble." Deirdre paused, a look of resignation crossing her face. "No, it's not that serious." Hearing this, the operator finally let out a long sigh of relief. Linda shouted over her shoulder, "Clark, the client's here. Get out here." Deirdre was startled by the loud voice and instinctively glanced at Linda. Such a small body, yet so much energy. No wonder she became a police officer. Soon, a figure emerged from the inner room. Dark circles lingered beneath his eyes, and stubble had begun to sprout on his chin. He looked utterly exhausted. Deirdre brightened immediately, her voice lifting with excitement. "It's you, my savior." Clark followed the sound and was startled to see Deirdre standing before him. He had just lifted his foot when, as if remembering something, he turned sideways and said to Linda, "Take her to the conference room. I'll be right there." Deirdre was about to say something when Clark ducked back into the inner room. Linda smiled and spread her hands. "Come on, let's go first." Deirdre nodded, but her curious gaze drifted toward the inner room. Sitting once more at this recording desk, Deirdre felt entirely different. Last time she had come as a victim, this time, she would reclaim every bit of the reputation she had lost. Deirdre was lost in thought when she heard the conference room door open. Clark walked in. Deirdre couldn't help but brighten up at the sight. Clark had changed out of his wrinkled casual clothes and into a clean, neat uniform. Even the stubble on his chin had disappeared, and one could still see the tiny droplets of water he hadn't properly wiped off after hastily splashing his face. He looked neat and crisp overall. Deirdre withdrew her scrutinizing gaze, feeling her favorable impression of him grow by another degree. Clark sat down at the opposite table, opening his notebook. "We've checked Juliet's account and indeed found financial transactions with online trolls. The court process report you provided also proves everything she said was fabricated." Clark fixed his deep eyes intently on Deirdre. "The retweet count on this Twitter post is sufficient to file a case. It's up to you whether to press charges." Deirdre took the financial transaction evidence handed by Clark, a serious glint flashing in her eyes. "Of course we'll file the lawsuit. I want to prove that no one can escape the judgment of the law." Deirdre's resolute declaration brought a flicker of amusement to Clark's eyes. He cleared his throat and straightened his posture. "Now, about your assault case. The perpetrator has prior records of domestic violence and infidelity. He was probably dissatisfied with his trial verdict, which made him easily swayed when Juliet approached him." Deirdre could still vividly recall the heart-pounding fear from that moment, and a surge of anger welled up within her. Deirdre declared resolutely, "I will make every single one of them pay the price they deserve." Clark allowed a faint smile to curl his lips as he picked up a paper file from the side and slid it toward Deirdre. "The troublemakers have all been taken to the police station. None will escape due punishment." Deirdre raised an eyebrow and lowered her head to examine the file. The file clearly documented all the information about the troublemaker. complete with signed interrogation transcripts and a confession statement. Deirdre looked up in astonishment and said incredulously, "That's way too fast." Clark remained silent, but it was obvious he was in a good mood at the moment. Linda suddenly popped her head in at that moment. She still wore that same cheerful smile, but her words came out in a rapid-fire burst. "Ever since taking on your case, Clark hasn't slept for almost a week, just tracking down those thugs." Clark staked out the market for 3 full days and nights. Deirdre was utterly astonished, only now realizing why there happened to be a police officer passing by when she was attacked at the market. Deirdre said with genuine admiration, "You're truly dedicated." Clark's smile froze instantly at the corners of his mouth. Clark whipped his head around to glare at Linda. "What's it to you? Get back to your workstation before someone files a complaint." Linda stuck out her tongue playfully and walked ahead, calling out loudly as she went, "Oh please, this wasn't your attitude when you begged me to check the surveillance footage." Clark frowned and looked at Deirdre, explaining earnestly, "Don't mind her, I personally reviewed most of the surveillance footage." Deirdre tilted her head with a smile at the corner of her lips. "Officer, are you fishing for compliments?" Clark seemed to catch on and laughed along. The two then discussed the case further, with all necessary details properly recorded. Clark glanced at his watch and exclaimed in surprise, "It's already 10 o'clock." Deirdre, startled, grabbed her bag from the side. "I need to head back, I haven't finished tidying up at home." Clark immediately stood up as well, his gaze following her. "Let me walk you home." "It's too late, it's not safe for you to go alone." Deirdre, startled, her mind unexpectedly conjuring the ruthless expression Alfred had worn when he watched her leave late at night not long ago. Deirdre frowned, her heart faintly aching once more. Stop thinking about him. The decision to divorce had been made, it was time to swiftly embrace a brand new life. Hurting herself over him simply wasn't worth it. Deirdre thought of this, raised her head, and flashed a radiant smile at Clark. "Great, then I'll trouble you with it." Clark was driving his private car this time, and the two soon arrived at the building. Deirdre opened the car door, and Clark promptly stepped out after her. Deirdre looked at Clark with a genuine smile. "Thank you, not just for the case." Clark was taken aback for a moment, then smiled in return. Deirdre said her goodbyes and was about to head upstairs when a pair of polished leather shoes came into view. Looking up, Deirdre recognized the silent figure standing in the stairwell, Alfred. He remained as aloof as ever, his eyes devoid of any emotion. Deirdre turned sideways and silently went upstairs. At the moment they passed each other, Deirdre felt a hand tightly gripping her wrist. His voice echoed through the silent hallway. "Where have you been?" Deirdre's previously light and cheerful mood instantly darkened. Deirdre didn't look up, answering coldly, "I'm not obligated to explain my whereabouts to you." Alfred's breathing suddenly became rapid, his palms were burning hot. Deirdre couldn't help reaching out to pull away. Alfred took the opportunity to grasp Deirdre's other hand. The two were forced face to face. Deirdre only then noticed the faint exhaustion in his eyes, and her struggling abruptly weakened. Deirdre turned her head away, her voice hoarse. "Don't pull and tug at me in the stairwell, it's an eyesore." Alfred pulled her hand, and Deirdre uncontrollably stumbled into his arms. Deirdre, startled, began struggling again. "Who is he?" Alfred asked again, this time with an inexplicable note of accusation in his voice. "I hope you realize we're not divorced yet." Deirdre jerked her head up, her eyes filled with disbelief. "What do you mean by that?" Alfred suddenly came to his senses, realizing the current situation. He abruptly let go of his grip. Deirdre instead yanked Alfred closer, staring straight into his eyes. "Are you suspecting me of cheating?" Alfred turned his face away without speaking. By the same token, it meant he wasn't denying it. Deirdre's eyes brimmed with profound sorrow, her hands clutching Alfred's trembling slightly. She let go without a word and took a few steps upstairs. Alfred's clothes were crumpled, but he leaned weakly against the wall, clearly in no state to straighten them. Deirdre suddenly turned back, descended a few steps, and stood before Alfred. Her footsteps were heavy, the sound of her descent echoing through the entire stairwell. "Alfred." Deirdre looked up. Staring directly at Alfred, she appeared calm now, though the faint redness at the corners of her eyes betrayed her. "We'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow to get divorced." Alfred suddenly looked up, a flicker of astonishment crossing his face before it settled back into calm. Alfred snorted lightly, smoothing out the wrinkles in his clothes with deliberate care. Once again, he had become the invulnerable Alfred. "What, you think you can handle your mother now?" Alfred leaned in slightly, his breath close enough to feel. "Are you sure that if we divorce, she won't come begging me to remarry you?" Deirdre was stunned, a deep sense of humiliation washing over her. With a forceful shove, Alfred actually staggered back several steps. Get out of my house, this is my premarital property. Deirdre stood on higher ground, looking down at him with the advantage of elevation. Alfred grabbed the stair railing to steady his stumbling, his pupils dilated slightly. His entire face frozen in shock. Deirdre kept a stern expression, her eyes brimming with seriousness. You don't need me to explain what prenuptial assets are, do you? No need, Alfred cut in almost before she'd finished speaking. He let out what seemed like a self-deprecating sigh, then turned and left without hesitation. Deirdre braced herself against the staircase to steady her trembling body. As he walked away, Alfred paused almost imperceptibly. His voice wasn't loud, yet exceptionally clear. I'll sleep at the hotel. Deirdre stood in place for a long time, still unable to comprehend why he'd left with those words before departing. He'd always come and gone as he pleased. Why did he suddenly mention his whereabouts during the divorce? Was it to prove to himself that he hadn't gone to someone else's house? Deirdre looked dazed as she turned and walked home. It wasn't until Deirdre stood at the study door that her expression finally regained its composure. Deirdre had her own desk in this study before she left the law firm. Back then, the two of them would sit facing each other, occasionally exchanging glances. No matter how busy they were with work, life still felt sweet. Deirdre gently pushed open the study door and peered inside. Her original desk had already been claimed by someone else, now cluttered with messy case files. Deirdre cast her gaze around, finally letting it settle on a corner of the study, a brown leather suitcase. Deirdre crouched down, her fingers lightly brushing the suitcase only to come away coated in dust. The case opened to reveal a stack of photographs. There are photos of their adolescence, the intimate distance between front and back desks. There are photos of when they first confirmed their feelings, their eyes revealing an unconscious ambiguity. There are photos of their wedding, dressed in suits, exchanging a smile, a happiness no outsider could intrude upon. Deirdre collapsed to the ground, her body going completely limp. Her eyes were red-rimmed as her fingers lightly brushed over each one, awakening memories one by one. Deirdre could no longer hold back. She hugged the photographs and sobbed aloud. Her sorrow lingered in the empty room, refusing to fade. The following afternoon, Deirdre carried the last box of luggage toward the post station, fine beads of sweat glistening on her neck. She set the luggage down heavily, then clutched her waist in pain as she straightened up. A staff member at the post station teased, "You're still so young, being this weak isn't good." Deirdre forced an awkward smile, her hand still massaging her waist. The staff member handed over a stack of shipping forms and said, "Please double-check everything one last time. If there are no issues, we'll load them up and be on our way." Deirdre carefully verified the addresses and quantities before nodding and returning the forms. The staff loaded the assorted packages onto the truck, which then sped off in a cloud of dust. Deirdre lightly brushed the dust from her hands, her cheeks flushed with the natural glow of physical exertion. Deirdre was about to turn around and head home when her phone vibrated violently in her pants pocket. Deirdre pinched the phone between two fingers, and two bold characters glared from the screen. "Mom." Deirdre let out a deep sigh and answered the call. Deirdre's mom voice was filled with anger as she suppressed her fury, issuing a simple command. "Come home, get your ass over here right now." With that, Deirdre's mom hung up the phone. Deirdre wore a look of helpless resignation. She knew that once this matter reached Deirdre's mom's ears, it would be like lighting the fuse of a powder keg. But this hurdle, she had to overcome. Deirdre went home to change clothes, then hurried to Deirdre's mom's place. The moment she pressed the doorbell, Deirdre still clung to the hope that perhaps Deirdre's mom wasn't angry about this matter. But the one who opened the door for Deirdre turned out to be Alfred. He was dressed in casual clothes, and unusually, his hair fell softly over his forehead. Deirdre hadn't seen him looking so casual in years, and for a moment, both of them froze where they stood. Deirdre's mom's voice rang out in the room. "What are you doing at the door? Come inside already." Deirdre only then came to her senses and sidled into the room. Alfred closed the door behind her and stood in silence. Deirdre's mom sat on the sofa, her eyes darting between the two of them. "Go on then, whose idea was this divorce?" Deirdre took a deep breath, met Deirdre's mom's gaze squarely, and said calmly, "It's mine." Alfred remained silent, standing quietly to the side. Deirdre's mom's face flushed instantly as she stepped forward and raised her hand to strike. Deirdre was startled and instinctively took a step back. Alfred stepped forward, standing rigidly in front of Deirdre. Deirdre's mom slapped Alfred on the chin instead. Deirdre immediately pushed Alfred away, horrified. "Mom." Deirdre's mom was caught off guard and stared blankly at Alfred. Alfred tilted his face slightly, his tone far from pleasant. "Mom, no matter how angry you are, you can't hit people." Deirdre's mom awkwardly hid her hands behind her back. then shifted her gaze as if finding a fresh excuse. You see how much Alfred cares about you. Why are you still throwing tantrums with him? Divorce is not allowed, Deirdre choked up, weakly looking at Deirdre's mom. Mom, this divorce is absolutely necessary. Alfred suddenly turned to look at Deirdre, his expression darkening slightly. Deirdre's mom widened her eyes and retorted. Is divorce the only option? Deirdre remained silent but nodded firmly nonetheless. Deirdre's mom suddenly lost all strength, nearly collapsing to the ground. Mom! Deirdre's heart leaped into her throat as she cried out and rushed forward to catch her. Alfred strode forward and steadied Deirdre's mom onto the ground. But by now, Deirdre's mom had already fainted. Deirdre helplessly shook Deirdre's mom's shoulders, tears streaming down like broken strings. Alfred freed his hands and quickly dialed 120. In just a few words, he clearly described the situation and address at the scene. After hanging up the phone, Alfred looked down at Deirdre. The ambulance will be here soon. Don't worry. Deirdre seemed not to hear his words at all. As tears continued to fall incessantly, Alfred frowned and firmly grasped Deirdre's hand, his tone more resolute than ever before. Calm down. Remember what I said, I've got you covered, and that hasn't changed. Deirdre felt the warmth from his palm gradually seeping through where their skin touched. Her previously chaotic mind began to settle in that instant. Okay, Deirdre looked at Alfred, taking deep breaths in an effort to stop her ceaselessly falling tears. Soon, the ambulance arrived and took Deirdre's mom to the hospital. While waiting for the doctor's examination, Deirdre sat numbly in the hospital corridor as if she had lost her backbone, unable to catch her breath, as time ticked by. When the nurse called Deirdre into the ward again, the corridor was already empty. Deirdre hurriedly pushed open the hospital room door, only to see Deirdre's mom chatting and laughing with the doctor. Her heart finally settled back into place. Deirdre leaned weakly against the doorframe, inching forward step by step. Deirdre's mom turned her head at the sound, and when she saw Deirdre, her face instantly darkened. The doctor sighed, put away the medical record in his hand, and looked at Deirdre. Is this your daughter? Deirdre's mom remained silent, stubbornly turning her head to the side. Deirdre anxiously asked the doctor, what's wrong with my mom? Why did she suddenly faint? The doctor was about to speak when Deirdre's mom cut him off. Her eyes widened as she fired off words like a machine gun. What else could it be? Of course she's furious with you. At the mention of this matter, Deirdre's mom immediately bristled like a cat stepping on firecrackers. Deirdre, tell me. What's the real reason you're so determined to divorce Alfred? As soon as these words were spoken, the doctor shook his head and walked out, considerately closing the door behind him. Deirdre fell silent at once, as a series of blows had gradually shattered her psychological defenses. She didn't want to explain everything again to her closest family. It would be like tearing open a bloody wound once more. Deirdre's mom also reddened around the eyes, and when she raised her hand, it trembled slightly. If you insist on getting divorced, then don't call me mom anymore. Deirdre looked up in disbelief. In an instant, her tears and sorrow overwhelmed her completely. Because I don't love him anymore. Deirdre covered her face in agony, tears streaming through her fingers as sobs echoed beyond the door. Alfred stood frozen in place, still clutching fresh fruit in his hand. After a long pause, he set the fruit down on the floor beside him and turned to leave. In the hospital room, Deirdre's sudden breakdown plunged Deirdre's mom into silence. After a long pause, her voice trembling, she said, then what will you do? Who would want someone who's been divorced? Do you want to end up alone like me, growing old in solitude? Deirdre could no longer hold back her emotions and threw herself into Deirdre's mom's arms. Scalding tears dripped onto the bedding, as if they were also falling on Deirdre's mom's heart. Deirdre looked at Deirdre's mom with swollen, red eyes, her hand tightly gripping Deirdre's mom's. Mom, I won't grow old alone, you'll always be by my side, won't you? Deirdre's mom, her eyes quietly reddened as she broke free, yet her hand gently rested on Deirdre's head. But everyone dies. What will you do when I'm gone? Deirdre bit her lower lip so hard it drew blood, while an inexplicable, hidden unease inexplicably surfaced in her heart. Mom, tell me, are you hiding something from me? Deirdre didn't miss Deirdre's mom the slightest change in expression, but Deirdre's mom just shot her an annoyed glare. Nothing of the sort. Don't try to change the subject. I'm telling you right now, if you dare get a divorce, I'll dare cut ties with you. Deirdre's mom still sounded full of vigor, making Deirdre set aside that tiny bit of unease in her heart. But upon clearly hearing the words from her mouth, Deirdre was overcome with profound exhaustion. Did you hear me? Deirdre's mom nudged Deirdre. Deirdre sighed and straightened up, nodding blankly. Seeing she'd gotten the response she wanted, Deirdre's mom immediately beamed and leaned in affectionately. I told you long ago, you'll inevitably argue without a child. Listen to me, you two should hurry up and have a baby. Deirdre swallowed the words that had just reached her lips. She couldn't bring herself to tell Deirdre's mom the truth, that she'd already been transferred to a neighboring province. The already fragile relationship between them, separated by distance, had no possibility of repair whatsoever. After leaving the ward, Deirdre went to the doctor's office to carefully inquire about Deirdre's mom's condition. Deirdre's mom had only experienced temporary fainting due to extreme emotional distress, with no life-threatening danger. Deirdre finally felt her heart settle back into place. The moment she stepped out, she couldn't tell whether it was a misperception or something else. Deirdre always felt the doctor's gaze held an indescribable pity when looking at her. Not long after returning to the ward, Deirdre was pushed out by Deirdre's mom with the excuse of hurrying back to mend their relationship. Deirdre was helplessly facing this rejection when a nurse gently patted her shoulder. Deirdre turned toward the sound and saw a nurse holding an exquisite fruit basket. This seems to have been left by the man who accompanied you to the hospital. Should I bring it in? Deirdre only then realized he had disappeared at some point without her noticing. Deirdre couldn't identify what she was feeling at that moment, only that it tasted bitterly bitter. Then I'll trouble you with it. The nurse nodded and entered the ward with the fruit basket. Deirdre heard Deirdre's mom burst into laughter inside the ward, and only then did she finally leave. Inside the ward, Deirdre's mom heard Deirdre's departing footsteps, and her smile froze on her face. The nurse sighed and helped Deirdre's mom lie back down. Are you really not going to tell your daughter? Deirdre's mom turned her body slightly, her face filled with deep sorrow. Why tell her? To make her suffer with me. The nurse wanted to say more, but seeing how Deirdre's mom still had her brows tightly knit even with her eyes closed, she found herself unable to voice any words of comfort. The nurse efficiently changed the bag and quietly closed the door behind her as she left. Deirdre's mom lay on the bed, her former vigor completely gone. With eyes closed, tears still trickled slowly from the wrinkled corners of her eyes. When she returned home again, Deirdre immediately spotted Alfred standing in the middle of the living room. Alfred gazed at the noticeably emptier room, his face wearing an inscrutable expression. Deirdre said nothing, brushed past Alfred and headed toward the bedroom. When are we leaving? Alfred asked in a cold voice. Deirdre glanced back at him. He stood there, looking strikingly out of place against the familiar living room backdrop. Deirdre immediately averted her gaze and replied in a low voice, leaving tomorrow. Alfred hummed in acknowledgement and said nothing more. Deirdre waited half a second before turning to enter the bedroom. As the door closed, Deirdre couldn't help but glance back outside. Alfred stood like a statue, as if he had lost all his soul. Deirdre leaned against the door, her eyes equally unfocused. Both maintained an unspoken agreement not to mention divorce again, but the room fell into complete silence. The next day, Deirdre packed her final belongings and prepared to leave with her suitcase. Alfred unexpectedly emerged from the side bedroom at this hour. By all accounts, he should have been at the law firm by now. Deirdre didn't look at him, nor did she wish to exchange any words. As they brushed past each other, Alfred grasped Deirdre's arm. The scalding heat transmitted through their skin made Deirdre's heart suddenly burn with intensity. Deirdre turned to look at Alfred. Alfred kept his head down, but Deirdre could still see the struggle in his eyes. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Can you not go? His voice was low, inexplicably tinged with sorrow. Otherwise, you could resign, and I'll find you a job at DS. Deirdre let out a derisive laugh and looked up at the man before her. What do you take me for? Some poor relative looking for backdoor favors? Alfred frowned slightly, loosening his grip but remaining silent. Deirdre gave a mocking smile upon seeing his quick release, then turned to leave. At that moment, Deirdre's phone rang. Deirdre took out her phone, only to unexpectedly see her graduate advisor's number on the screen. Deirdre quickly answered the call. Professor, what brings you to call me all of a sudden? From the other end came Mr. Black's vigorous voice. Something this big happened. How could you still keep it from me? Deirdre felt a pang in her heart as a warm current flowed through it. I was afraid you'd worry. I thought I should try to handle it myself if possible. Mr. Black snorted coldly on the other end of the phone and snapped. It's been half a month, and your trending topic is still up there. Is this what you call resolved? Deirdre felt a wave of embarrassment. Mr. Black never used Twitter. Some senior must have ratted her out. What's the court's decision on this? Deirdre honestly confessed. They transferred me to another state. Absurd. Your transfer practically confirms your guilt. How can you take responsibility for something fabricated out of thin air? Mr. Black grew furious and began cursing the presiding court officials over the phone. Deirdre didn't dare respond. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Alfred smirking slightly. Deirdre turned sideways, lowering her voice even further. "Professor, what should we do now? I've already been suspended." Mr. Black finally stopped his furious outburst, paused slightly, and immediately said, "Who dares lay a finger on my student? Let's see who has the guts." Mr. Black hung up the phone in a hurry as soon as he finished speaking. Deirdre let out a light sigh, suddenly unsure of where to go. If she were to leave, now would be the time to set out. But leaving like this would be exactly as her teacher had said, tantamount to admitting guilt. Until the police released their findings, she couldn't leave this place for even a day. Deirdre let go of her suitcase and turned around to meet Alfred's inquiring gaze. "Not leaving anymore," Deirdre nodded firmly, saying, "I haven't done anything wrong, why should I leave?" Whether it was an illusion or not, after uttering these words, Deirdre actually caught a fleeting glimpse of relief in Alfred's eyes. Deirdre looked again, but Alfred's expression was now flawlessly composed. It must have been a trick of the light. Deirdre felt relieved. And the suitcase in front of her suddenly seemed like an eyesore. "Excuse me." Alfred remained standing at the study door, neither entering nor budging from blocking it completely. Deirdre had no choice but to speak up. Alfred stepped aside. Deirdre walked past him and entered. Alfred was about to follow when the study door shut in his face. He frowned deeply, his expression darkening. "I want to go in too." Alfred reached out and knocked on the door, only to hear Deirdre's impatient voice from inside the room. "I have something to do. You can use the study after I come out." Alfred had never faced this attitude from Deirdre before and froze in place for a moment. After a while, the study door opened again. Deirdre came out holding a small box. Alfred had a vague recollection of this box. It was the fountain pen set Deirdre had bought for him last year. "What are you doing with this? Wasn't this pen a gift for me?" Alfred reached out to stop Deirdre. Deirdre paused mid-step. She looked up at Alfred and shook the unopened pen packaging in her hand. "You've had it for a year and never thought to use it. I went through the trouble of having this pen shipped from France. It's priceless. If you don't need it, of course I should put it to good use." Alfred frowned deeply, his face twisting with disbelief. "You?" Deirdre suddenly laughed, lifting her head with unmistakable defiance in her eyes. "What's the matter?" "Mr. Alfred, if you want it so badly, go buy another one yourself. Surely you're not too cheap to spare the expense." Alfred flashed a faint glimmer of anger in his eyes, but it was quickly and forcefully suppressed. "Have you been in high positions for so long that you can't even take a little sarcasm?" Deirdre didn't give him another chance to speak. Pulling out an unused gift bag and placing the pen inside, Alfred quickly composed himself. Watching Deirdre's efficient movements, and recalling her attitude towards the transfer before and after the phone call, he began to form some suspicions. "Is it for Mr. Black?" Alfred suddenly chimed in. Deirdre paused mid-motion, neither denying nor confirming. Alfred pursed his lips and offered his advice. "Even if we're short on time, we can't bring this fountain pen for the visit. Mr. Black isn't accustomed to its weight." Deirdre looked up at him abruptly, a flicker of surprise flashing in her eyes. Alfred walked straight into the study and emerged moments later holding an antique box. "Use this instead, a replica of Ming Dynasty Cinnabar inkstick. It's far more priceless than what you're holding." Mr. Black has been obsessed with calligraphy lately, posting his works multiple times on social media. Deirdre, her gaze fell on his hand, hesitating for a moment before finally reaching out to accept his gift. "Thank you." Deirdre, her voice suddenly turned a bit hoarse. Alfred said nothing more, picking up the fountain pen beside him and hesitating for a long while. "Actually, the weight of the pen Mr. Black and I usually use is the same. This one feels too light for me." Alfred, after saying this, he entered the study. Deirdre stood frozen in place, a fine, dense sourness welling up in her heart. After calming down for a while, Deirdre went out and boarded a car heading to Mr. Black's home. Mr. Black and his wife lived in the university faculty residential area where Deirdre had studied during her graduate years. Several years had passed in the blink of an eye. It could be said that apart from Deirdre's mom, the second elder Deirdre was relatively close to was Mr. Black. But except for New Year's and Mr. Black's birthday, Deirdre rarely visited him. For one, she truly had little free time, and secondly, ever since Deirdre compromised her career for the sake of her family, she always felt an indescribable guilt whenever she faced her former mentor. Was it worth giving up her dreams for that little home with Alfred? Deirdre had been thinking about many trivial things on her way here. Standing right in front of the familiar doorstep, Deirdre felt a wave of timidity rise in her heart. Deirdre frowned and couldn't help but tighten her grip on the bag in her hand. Suddenly, the door swung open. Mr. Black stood at the entrance, his expression stern. With his hands clasped behind his back, "There's a camera at my front door. I saw you lurking here long ago, hesitant to come in, afraid I might eat you." Deirdre gave a bitter smile and silently lowered her head. Mr. Black's wife quickly came to the rescue, gently patting Mr. Black's shoulder before turning a kind gaze toward Deirdre. "Come in. Don't listen to your teacher's nonsense. He was actually thrilled to see you on the surveillance footage, Mr. Black." Cleared his throat lightly but offered no rebuttal. Deirdre's eyes suddenly reddened. She'd never imagined someone had been quietly keeping her in their thoughts all this time. Deirdre extended the gift in her hands. Mr. Black was taken aback, his eyes sparkling with delight, yet his mouth kept grumbling. "Do I look like someone who needs your little gift?" As he spoke, Mr. Black quickly unwrapped the gift, and his eyes suddenly lit up. "This is really something special." The teacher's wife flashed a gentle smile and gave another push, shoving Mr. Black away from the doorway. "Don't block the entrance here. If you want to examine it, go study it in your study." Mr. Black finally snapped out of his pleasant surprise, his gaze falling upon Deirdre with noticeably softened eyes. Deirdre changed her shoes and settled onto the living room sofa. Mr. Black sat on the nearby tea stool, his expression shifting from casual to serious. "I've heard about your situation from your senior brother. If I don't intervene, what exactly were you planning to do?" Deirdre felt somewhat embarrassed, lowering her head as she explained carefully. "I've filed a report with the police. Once the investigation results come out, the truth will be revealed." Mr. Black still frowned. "But have you considered how many media outlets would actually report the truth? If the coverage is low, this stain might follow you for life." Deirdre turned pale, her fingers curling tightly. "But the court has already made its choice. I have no other options." Mr. Black snorted coldly, waving his hand dismissively. "A bunch of legal professionals afraid of public opinion. Just thinking about them makes me laugh." Then with a shift in tone, Mr. Black pulled out a contract from under the table. "This is a variety show from the TV station with high viewership. When official recording begins, you'll be a special guest. Your case will be their premiere case for the new season." Deirdre opened the contract in her hands, and what caught her eye was actually a performance contract for the most popular legal reality show currently airing. She looked up in shock, seeing nothing but sheer self-satisfaction flashing in the old man's eyes. "When it comes to media warfare, old Gary here still has some connections." At this point, with Mr. Black's intervention, the court quietly removed the previous Twitter post. Some troublemakers continued their online feud on Twitter. Surprisingly, the court's official blue-checked account boldly posted a new Twitter. "The truth will always come to light." Such a firm stance has helped many netizens regain their rationality. Once the tide of public opinion shifted, certain individuals began to grow restless. Juliet posted another new Twitter, this time sharing a depression diagnosis certificate. She looked unwell and stated that the relentless cyberbullying had become unbearable for her. If Deirdre doesn't face legal consequences soon, she will end her own life. It caused quite a stir for a time. The escalating online did not affect Deirdre's normal life. Deirdre successfully signed the contract with the television station under the witness of Mr. Black. The television station quickly made all the preparations, and formal recording began 3 days later. Meanwhile, the police procedures had reached their final stages, with the truth just within reach. Rumors are currently running rampant online. Deirdre's announcement of joining the variety show was pushed by public opinion, trending once again. The TV station stated this was promotional build-up for tonight's premiere. Deirdre did not object, yet neither did she show understanding. She herself was swept up by public opinion, standing before everyone to face a compulsory trial. Now she must once again use public opinion to cleanse the injustices inflicted upon her. One might call this the wheel of karma turning. But no matter how fiercely netizens boycotted this variety show, when the time came, the program aired as scheduled. The show invited many well-known male and female celebrities to perform a pre-planned reality show in a specific setting. The theme of the first episode was cyberbullying. At the end of the show, the perpetrator did not escape successfully, and the truth was fully revealed. But in the story, those who died because of cyberbullying could never come back to life. At this moment, the variety show reached its ending, featuring a brief courtroom deliberation scene. In the scene, Deirdre calmly and composedly analyzes the legal provisions involved in the fictional case. Online violence causes irreversible harm to people. In response, the law has established a series of regulations specifically to address and restrain such behavior. Even a single negative comment you casually post might become the final straw that breaks the victim. The truth will come out eventually, and I look forward to that day." Deirdre spoke at a measured pace, her entire figure glowing softly under the studio lights. Meanwhile, the internet had erupted into complete frenzy. The police department's verified Blue account posted detailed case resolution documents on Twitter. From Juliet starting to hire internet trolls to the process of hiring a hitman, everything was clearly documented, and the post directly tagged the court at the end. "The truth will always come to light." Juliet's Twitter account was banned within an hour. Police arrested Juliet in person at a rented apartment. Deirdre, the nationwide trial that lasted half a month has finally come to an end. The court of public opinion online shifted in an instant. Netizens flocked to the court's Twitter to express their wrongful accusations against Deirdre, offering apologies one after another, but simultaneously, more humiliated and enraged netizens redirected their arrows, beginning to meticulously dig into Juliet's past. Photos of Juliet from her youth were posted online for public circulation. Even images of her in tears were maliciously captured and turned into GIFs. Deirdre did not step forward at first. It wasn't until Juliet's wedding photo was leaked, with her ex-husband's face accidentally caught in the frame, and that 5-year-old child suddenly became the target of online attacks because Juliet was imprisoned. The situation gradually spiraled out of control. The Cyber Surveillance Department released a video personally recorded by Deirdre, while banning all violating accounts. In the video, Deirdre wore a court uniform with the court's emblem on her chest. Deirdre did not elaborate on all the grievances she had endured during this period, only repeatedly reciting the relevant legal provisions. Her voice was gentle yet carried an energy that made it impossible not to believe her. At the end of the video, Deirdre faced the camera with a sincere smile. "Please do not vent your hostility on unrelated individuals. We all need to remember this. Justice resides in the hearts of the people." Half a month later, the matter gradually subsided. Juliet was sentenced to 10 years in prison for public defamation and hiring a hitman. After several twists and turns, her child was eventually adopted by Juliet's ex-husband. Rumor has it, the child is living a happier life than when with Juliet. Those troublemakers who caused a scene in front of the courthouse spent 10 days in jail for provoking disorder and emerged with considerably subdued dispositions. As for the man who committed the malicious assault, he was diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder and consequently confined to a social welfare psychiatric hospital, vanishing without further news, and Deirdre was smoothly reinstated to her former position. This matter completely vanished from everyone's sight. But surprisingly, Alfred actually joined the filming of a variety show after a few episodes, under the guise of being a couple act, but Deirdre knew it was just a gimmick for the show. Alfred wore his custom-tailored suit, speaking eloquently before the camera. Deirdre could clearly hear the female staff behind her discussing him. Their marital relationship was brought up by the host on the very first day, yet even so, the gazes directed at him only grew more numerous. Deirdre didn't engage much with Alfred, only noticing in her peripheral vision that an extra chair had suddenly appeared on one side of the round table. "Is there another guest coming?" Deirdre asked the stagehand in a hushed voice. The stagehand looked at the empty chair, something flashing through their mind. Suddenly, they dashed out while muttering, "Oh no, we left the police representative waiting outside." Deirdre finally looked at the composition of the entire program staff, a judge, a lawyer, and naturally, adding a police officer didn't seem particularly strange either. Deirdre sat quietly at the round table, her head bowed as she reviewed the key points of today's case. It was a kidnapping case. The prototype is an unsolved amusement park kidnapping case to this day. Deirdre continued flipping through the documents in her hands when she suddenly heard a girl's soft gasp. "Look, that policeman is really handsome. Can I ask for his WeChat after the show ends?" Deirdre was intrigued by the voice and turned to look. To her surprise, it was Clark. He wore a neatly pressed police uniform, his usually messy hair combed back to reveal a smooth forehead. The outfit perfectly accentuated all his physical advantages. Deirdre raised her hand and waved, flashing an effortlessly natural smile. Clark met her gaze and returned a faint smile of his own. Deirdre's young assistant, crouched by her knees, asked with a touch of envy, "Your Honor, do you know this officer?" Deirdre nodded, only realizing how popular Clark's type was in today's society after noticing the look in her assistant's eyes. Alfred involuntarily tightened his grip on the fountain pen, his gaze drifting toward that man with a flicker of displeasure. Clark quickly completed his makeup and styling before taking his seat at the round table. The on-site director called cut, and all cameras began rolling simultaneously. The host sat at the far right, while the remaining three positioned themselves toward the left side of the round table with Deirdre at the center. Deirdre could sense two completely different auras surrounding her, after a brief introduction by the host. The event quickly moved on to the main agenda. This case has a real-life counterpart. Back then, the perpetrator, suffering from a terminal illness, developed radical thoughts and abducted a little girl from an amusement park. She remains missing to this day. Some sympathize with the little girl, while others pity the perpetrator, believing his crime stemmed from an act of desperation. From your professional perspective, what should this case look like? The host's questions were highly professional, pinpointing the most debatable aspects of the current case. Alfred answered without hesitation. When it comes to crime, there's no such thing as pitiable. Wrong is wrong. Alfred had barely finished speaking when Clark picked up the microphone. I disagree with Mr. Alfred's statement. It's completely detached from reality. Alfred's brows furrowed sharply. Deirdre looked at Clark in surprise. This was the first time someone had openly opposed Alfred in public. Clark seemed oblivious to the chilly atmosphere in the room and continued stating his case. Everyone, no matter how noble, can make mistakes in moments of impulse. The law exists to restrain people, but ultimately, it's meant to help them. You're wrong, we'll correct it. Once it's corrected, that's it, no need to be so strict. Alfred let out a cold snort, clearly displeased with certain words in the conversation. Then who will bear the grief of the victim's family? When your own mistakes cause harm to others, do you still want to justify yourself by saying I'll correct it? Please don't criticize me. Clark's face darkened as well. Clearly, Alfred had seized upon the loophole in his words. When it comes to eloquence, Clark stands little chance against a lawyer. Deirdre let out a slight sigh and joined the debate. I think you've misunderstood Officer Gary's intention. He simply hopes every offender, even those who've done wrong, can have a second chance. Clark's eyes lit up as he suddenly turned to look at Deirdre. Alfred pursed his lips tightly before finally asking after a long pause, does everyone deserve a second chance? Deirdre was taken aback, a sour bitterness welling up inside her. She certainly understood the implication behind his words. That's just the ideal scenario, clearly. Once human relationships are involved, it's impossible to remain 100% rational. Clark darted his gaze between the two of them and suddenly chimed in with this remark. Alfred looked at Clark, unable to suppress the anger rising in his eyes. What do you mean? Clark smiled candidly. What I mean is, you're right, everyone who does something wrong should. Clark leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed intently on Deirdre. Pay the price. Alfred suddenly stood up, his breathing becoming rapid. Deirdre remained seated, her back perfectly straight. The staff had no idea what kind of charade the three of them were playing, whispering gossip among themselves. Deirdre suddenly smiled in relief, turning to Clark beside her. You're right. Whether it's the protagonists in today's story or us outside of it, we should all take responsibility for the mistakes we've made. Alfred clutched his fountain pen tightly, his gaze fixed intently on Deirdre. Deirdre smiled while glancing at the host beside her. What I just said would make a pretty good closing remark. How about we wrap things up here for today? The host also sensed the tension among the three and quickly stood up to agree. Deirdre pulled off her lapel microphone and strode toward the dressing room. As soon as she opened the dressing room door, Deirdre's hand was tightly grabbed, and she was immediately pushed into the room. Deirdre turned around in surprise, recognized the face of the newcomer, and felt a surge of anger in her heart. Alfred, what do you want? Alfred locked the door behind him and stepped closer to Deirdre. Do you know that cop from earlier? His tone wasn't pleasant, clearly laced with accusation. Deirdre's chest heaved with barely contained fury. We know each other, Deirdre responded coldly. Alfred smirked disdainfully. Does he know about you and me? Deirdre raised an eyebrow, finally taking a proper look at his face. The person before me wore a dark expression, his eyes brimming with unfathomable anger. Suddenly, Deirdre curved her lips into a smile as she leaned closer to Alfred, lowering her voice. What, are you jealous? Alfred tightly grasped Deirdre's hand, his gaze locked firmly on her eyes. Answer me, does he know about us? Deirdre also let out a mocking laugh, meeting Alfred's gaze without hesitation. Yes, he knows everything, including the fact that I'm divorcing you now. Alfred's pupils dilated slightly, his hands beginning to tremble faintly. I don't agree to the divorce. Do you hear me? Deirdre remained indifferent, saying coldly, if I remember correctly, you've already signed the divorce papers. Alfred couldn't help but step closer. Your mother won't agree to your divorce. Alfred, Deirdre interrupted him, her eyes showing faint resistance. I'll personally talk to my mother about it. That has nothing to do with you. Alfred released his grip, his eyes filled with profound disbelief. Deirdre felt her heart swell with a bittersweet ache as she saw him like this. If only back then, You could have told me with such certainty that you didn't want us to part, then we never should have come to this." After Alfred finished his harsh words, Deirdre left the studio. Recalling his confident assertion that she wouldn't divorce, Deirdre was determined to visit Deirdre's mom's house, but as soon as she stepped out of the studio, Deirdre saw Clark leaning against a car, apparently waiting for someone. Deirdre had just averted her gaze when Clark waved at her from over there. Deirdre pointed at herself in surprise. Seeing Clark nod vigorously, she felt puzzled but still walked over. Just as she reached Clark, Deirdre heard a girl's voice coming from behind Clark's car. "Let me see, let me see." The car door suddenly swung open, and the woman who stepped out immediately threw herself at Deirdre the moment she saw her. The person who arrived was the long-unseen Elsa. Deirdre returned the hug while looking at Clark in surprise, as if asking, "Why is she in your car?" Clark pursed his lips and turned his head away. Deirdre grew even more puzzled. Is this what they call being tsunder? Are they really that close? Deirdre peeled the clingy Elsa off herself and stared at her. "Out with it, how did you get out of his car?" Elsa widened her eyes with an innocent expression. "Because we were just discussing where to go for our 10-year class reunion," Deirdre asked in surprise. "Why would you discuss the class reunion with him?" Clark snorted coldly and turned his body away completely. Elsa circled around Deirdre a few more times, clicking her tongue in disapproval. Deirdre blushed slightly and quickly grabbed Elsa, whispering pleadingly, "I really don't know, just tell me." Elsa looked helplessly at Clark, spreading her hands. "You were right. Deirdre really doesn't remember you at all." Clark nodded, his gaze at Deirdre tinged with a hint of accusation. "Yeah, I recognized her at first sight, but when she saw me for the first time, all she gave me was a polite thank you." Elsa gave Deirdre a hard punch, her eyes filled with exasperation. "I think your brain is completely occupied by Alfred." Deirdre raised her hand with a puzzled expression. "Stop speaking in riddles, who is he really?" Elsa sighed and replied helplessly. "He was the student who sat behind you in high school, our class 6 of 2014 high school graduate." "Clark?" Deirdre froze for a moment, then turned to look at Clark. Clark lowered his head dejectedly and said softly, "I transferred in halfway through senior year. It's normal that you don't remember me." Deirdre was utterly embarrassed now. She could only force a few awkward laughs and sharply tugged at Elsa's clothes several times. Elsa seeing this, Elsa answered her questions with satisfaction. "A few days ago, I went to your place and found you weren't home. Right after I left, I ran into him. With just one glance, I recognized him as my high school classmate." Deirdre felt her face grow even hotter as she looked at Clark. "I'm really sorry. I honestly didn't recognize you." Clark pursed his lips, then smiled candidly. "It's fine. I was always stirring up trouble back then. Skipping classes and getting into fights were regular occurrences. I hardly ever went to school properly." Elsa widened her eyes at this. "Oh right, I remember. You used to be dragged to school by your dad back then. We all used to say." At this point, Elsa gave an awkward smile, unable to bring herself to say another word. Clark simply laughed it off. "No worries, calling me a slacker, right? I've heard that before." Elsa pressed her lips together, swallowing her words. Deirdre stood awkwardly to the side, feeling as though time had slowed to a crawl. Clark suddenly grinned, his eyes locking onto Deirdre. "I was quite a mess, but someone once told me that her biggest dream in life was to become a lawyer." At that moment, I thought to myself, if I kept messing around like this, who knows, the next time we met might be in a courtroom. How embarrassing would that be? So I turned over a new leaf and eventually got into the police academy. Pretty inspiring, don't you think? Deirdre froze in place. Elsa covered her mouth, her eyes darting between Deirdre and Clark. Deirdre felt a lump rise in her throat. Her words cut off by Clark before she could finish. "What's with those looks? You didn't actually believe me, did you?" Clark burst into laughter, his eyes brimming with mirth. Elsa was utterly disappointed and began pummeling Clark in frustration. Deirdre felt a sudden tremor in her heart. She vaguely remembered, in the second semester of senior year, a transfer student joined our class. Rumor had it he was disobedient to his family, a truly bad person, and almost no one spoke to him. But Deirdre once saw him raise his fists in an alley, solely to protect a vulnerable girl. So, Deirdre unusually that day, didn't wait for Alfred after school, but instead turned to buy band-aids from the school clinic. She crouched beside the boy whose face was unclear and tossed the things she had bought at his feet. As she was about to leave, he called out to stop her. "Hey, do you have a dream?" The man struggled to his feet and spat a bloody mouthful onto the ground. Deirdre felt a wave of nervousness, gripping her backpack straps as her voice came out haltingly. "Yes, my dream is to become a lawyer." The person suddenly burst into laughter. Cursing under their breath, Deirdre immediately closed her eyes, deeply regretting her nosiness, but the man staggered to his feet, passed right in front of him, and never spoke another word. Deirdre saw him leave, then turned and ran away as fast as she could. After that, the boy transferred schools. Deirdre never believed she had the power to alter someone's future, yet the person before her possessed a future bright with promise. Yet, he changed because of her. Deirdre got into Clark's car. Clark turned to look at the two behind him. "Where are you heading now?" Elsa wrapped her arm around Deirdre's and rested her head on Deirdre's shoulder. "I've decided to follow Deirdre today. Wherever she goes, I go." Deirdre opened the map navigation. "Perfect timing. I'm heading to my mom's place. She was just talking about you last time and told me to drag you over." Elsa's eyes lit up as she snuggled closer with a grin. "Hey, what can I say? Everyone loves me." Deirdre let out a soft chuckle and fell silent. Just then, Deirdre's WeChat suddenly pinged. "Come home for a while later." Deirdre lowered her head while replying to the message. "Okay, Mom," Elsa chuckled. "You and your mom really are in sync, actually thinking the same thing." Deirdre nodded in agreement as well. The two exchanged a knowing smile. Clark was taken aback. "Do I have to go too?" Elsa sat up excitedly. "Of course, it's like doing homework before meeting the parents." Deirdre was amused and flicked Elsa's forehead playfully. "Keep talking nonsense, and I'll go by myself." Elsa covered her head and closed her mouth. Deirdre then looked at Clark with an apologetic expression. "Don't mind her, let's go. If we're any later, we'll miss dinner." Clark grunted in agreement and continued driving steadily. The car headed toward Deirdre's mom's house. After about 10 minutes, the group arrived at the entrance of the residential complex. Clark escorted the two to the staircase and was about to leave. Deirdre grabbed his arm with a serious expression. "You're already at our doorstep, won't you stay for dinner?" Clark waved his hands repeatedly. "Really, no need. Your mom doesn't even know me, what would I be doing there?" Elsa tutted and directly dragged Clark up the stairs. "If you don't know each other, you can get acquainted now." Deirdre nodded in agreement as well. Clark hesitated for a moment before sighing lightly. All right, I'll go, but can you let me walk on my own?" Elsa smiled contentedly before finally releasing Clark's hand. Their boisterous play sent waves of laughter echoing through the entire hallway, loud enough to be heard in every corner. Deirdre gave a helpless smile. Fortunately it was afternoon, or they'd surely have received complaints. The trio had just reached the doorway when, before they could knock, the door swung open of its own accord. Deirdre subconsciously thought it was Deirdre's mom who had opened the door, so she quickly put on a smile and stepped forward. "Mom, I've missed you so much." Deirdre's smile froze on her face. It turned out to be Alfred. Alfred was wearing an apron with a spatula in his hand. His aloof gaze swept past Deirdre, unexpectedly revealing an extremely faint smile. As his eyes shifted, Alfred noticed the man standing behind Deirdre. In an instant, Alfred's face darkened. Elsa glanced cautiously at Deirdre's expression and suddenly fell silent. Clark chuckled lightly. "Deirdre, it seems your ex-husband isn't too keen on letting us in." Elsa widened her eyes at Clark, seemingly surprised that Clark could be so blunt. Alfred suddenly glared coldly at Clark. "Let me say it again, we're not divorced yet." Clark replied carelessly. "It's bound to happen sooner or later, right, Deirdre?" Clark's gaze drifted toward Deirdre standing to the side. Deirdre felt sweat breaking out on her back under the scorching stares of all three. For a moment, no one spoke. From inside the room, Deirdre's mom's voice came through. "Has Deirdre arrived?" Alfred gave a soft hum and stepped aside to make space. Deirdre let out a sudden sigh of relief. "Thank goodness for Mom, saving me from dire straits." Deirdre took a deep breath and led the two of them inside. Alfred instinctively reached to take the bag from Deirdre's hands, but Deirdre lightly sidestepped, avoiding his gesture. Clark let out a mocking laugh. Alfred frowned at the man, his eyes already brimming with impatience. Elsa quickly grabbed Clark's arm and whispered urgently, "If you keep this up, we'll really get kicked out." Clark bent down and muttered, "I just can't stand him." When Deirdre came to the police station to give her statement, he never showed up once. Elsa widened her eyes and couldn't help retorting, "Well, now I can't stand him either." Though they kept their voices low, the confined space betrayed them. The two people ahead heard every word clearly. Alfred turned sideways, looking at Deirdre and said, "I won't do it again." Deirdre paused mid-step toward the living room, looking at Alfred in surprise. Alfred walked toward the kitchen after saying those words. Deirdre's mom heard something amiss in their voices and hurried out from the living room. When she saw Elsa, Deirdre's mom suddenly broke into a smile. "Elsa's here. Come let Auntie see if you've gotten prettier." Elsa immediately moved closer affectionately and hugged Deirdre's mom. Her expression suddenly changed to surprise as she looked at Deirdre. Deirdre, has Auntie lost a lot of weight? I can barely feel any flesh when I touch her. Deirdre's mom quickly patted Elsa's hand, feigning displeasure. What? Seeing Auntie has lost weight? Are you jealous? Deirdre's heart skipped a beat as she hurried forward to grasp Deirdre's mom's hand, only to find it icy cold. Mom, why are your hands so cold too? Deirdre grew anxious, but Deirdre's mom swiftly withdrew her hand. What are you worrying about? I've always had a weak constitution, cold hands and feet are just an old problem of mine. Deirdre looked suspiciously at Deirdre's mom, her unease growing stronger by the moment. Elsa quickly reassured her. It's fine, look how rosy Auntie's complexion is, probably nothing serious. Clark chimed in. Don't worry, if she were feeling unwell, Auntie would have told you already. Deirdre's mom nodded approvingly, only then noticing Deirdre followed by Clark. And this is? Deirdre's mom flashed a hint of confusion across her face. Clark quickly stepped forward and began introducing himself. Hello Auntie, my name is Clark, I'm a police officer. Deirdre's mom lit up and couldn't help leaning forward a little. You're a police officer, what a good boy. Clark laughed awkwardly a few times. Helplessly looking at Deirdre, Deirdre curled her lips. Mom, we're all hungry, let's chat after dinner. Deirdre's mom only then realized it was already noon. She nudged Deirdre and pointed toward the kitchen. Hurry, and go help Alfred in the kitchen. How can we let him handle everything alone? Deirdre responded while coaxing Deirdre's mom to sit on the sofa. After everyone had taken their seats, Deirdre finally sauntered into the kitchen at her own leisurely pace. Alfred remained silent the whole time, yet his hands moved with practiced ease. In truth, most of the kitchen work was already done, leaving only the finishing touches. Deirdre didn't lift a finger, instead leaning against a corner of the kitchen as she watched the people before her. Why did you come to my mom's house today? Alfred paused briefly, but his tone remained unchanged. He can come, but I can't. Deirdre chuckled lightly. He's my friend, of course he can come. Alfred stiffened, turning to stare directly at Deirdre. So, I'm not your friend. Deirdre averted her gaze, replying indifferently. Have you ever heard of divorced couples remaining friends? Alfred in that moment, it felt as if his heart was being skewered and roasted over flames. I'll say this one last time, Deirdre, divorce is out of the question. Alfred fixed his gaze intently on Deirdre, determined not to relent until he had her agreement. Deirdre flinched under the heat of his stare, instinctively averting her eyes. Once I've convinced my mother, we'll get divorced. Deirdre didn't wait for Alfred to respond. Picking up the dish beside her and walking out, Alfred stood in the kitchen, his face expressionless, yet his naturally hanging hand by his side was already clenched tightly. Upon closer inspection, even faint bloodshot veins had appeared in the whites of his eyes. Before long, all the dishes were served. Because the house was especially lively today, Deirdre's mom hardly stopped smiling. She was Clark very warmly, and in just 10 short minutes. She had already gathered all of Clark's personal information. Elsa stood by, gloating with schadenfreude. Deirdre called out, time to eat. The others took their seats one after another. Deirdre grabbed Deirdre's mom's hand and asked in a hushed voice, why is Alfred here? Deirdre's mom glanced at her sideways. I invited him. Since the child still hasn't been found, I had to take matters into my own hands. Deirdre felt a pang of sorrow as she squeezed Deirdre's mom's hand. But all she felt was coldness. Deirdre's mom glanced at Alfred who had returned to the kitchen, lowering her voice to say, you're coming home with me tonight to reconnect. I want to see my precious grandson. Deirdre looked bitterly at the man, the churning emotions in her heart surging once again. Mom, the reason I came back this time was to tell you that Alfred and I, dinner's ready. Alfred took his seat, his gaze immediately settling on Deirdre. He now sat at the dining table, wearing a suit paired with an apron, creating an oddly harmonious contrast. Deirdre's mom instantly put on a smile, pulling Deirdre to the table. Let's eat, let's eat. Our family doesn't get to share meals together often anymore. We should learn to cherish these moments. Deirdre couldn't bear to hear such words and quickly interrupted. Mom, I'll come home for dinner more often from now on. Deirdre's mom instead turned her gaze to Alfred, her eyes flickering with hope. But what I truly hope is that you'll both come home for dinner together often. Don't you agree, Alfred? Deirdre felt a surge of bitterness spreading through her heart, her fingers tightening around the chopsticks. Alfred, however, remained silent. Elsa nervously bit her lower lip. Clark looked even more disdainful. Deirdre felt her eyes sting as she forced a smile, trying to brush past the topic. Okay, Alfred suddenly spoke up with a promise, and though it was just a single word, it sent Deirdre's heart into turmoil. The other two exchanged glances, their eyes filled with disbelief. Deirdre looked at Alfred in surprise, but he simply continued silently serving food to Deirdre's mom. Deirdre's mom got the answer she wanted, even the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepened. Deirdre's mom faced Deirdre, silently mouthing those words, "Grandson." Deirdre suddenly stood up, her heart churning and pounding restlessly. Deirdre's mom looked at Deirdre in surprise. "Mom, I'm leaving first. The matter just concluded, and I still have a lot of work to do." Deirdre didn't dare to look at their reactions after saying this, urging them to leave together. Deirdre's mom slammed her chopsticks heavily onto the dining table. Without saying a word, she froze Deirdre in place. Alfred let out an almost inaudible sigh, stood up, and looked at Deirdre. "I have something to do as well. I'll give you a ride home on the way." Deirdre instinctively wanted to refuse. But thinking of Deirdre's mom's attitude, she fell silent again. Deirdre's mom then leisurely continued eating, saying between bites, "Deirdre, remember what I just told you?" Deirdre felt a heavy wave of exhaustion and disappointment well up inside her, responding with a flat "Amham." Alfred was the first to leave. Deirdre hesitated for a moment before following after him. Clark had driven here, so he naturally took on the task of sending Elsa home. The remaining two returned home together. Deirdre immediately noticed upon entering that the house seemed largely unchanged. Deirdre stole a surprised glance at him. She had assumed that during her absence, Alfred would have opted for the more convenient option of staying at a hotel. "Keeping the house clean does take a lot of time," Alfred said in a deep voice. "I'll put your bag in the bedroom." As if afraid Deirdre might misunderstand, Alfred quickly added, "I'm staying in the side bedroom." Deirdre felt even more confused, but only responded with a cold hum. His attitude today was markedly different from usual. Deirdre sat on the edge of the bed frowning, her mind filled with confusion. Suddenly, there was a knock at the bedroom door. Deirdre stiffened and responded unnaturally, "Come in." Alfred stood at the doorway, showing no intention of entering. Deirdre looked at him with confusion. Alfred seemed to have something to say, his eyes revealing an unusual hesitation. "What do you want to say?" Deirdre asked proactively. Alfred remained unresponsive for quite some time, until Deirdre couldn't help but furrow her brows. "It's fine. Since the matter is over, just focus on being a judge. Don't dwell on the past, it won't do you any good." Alfred's words were like a fuse, instantly igniting the biggest hidden danger between them. Deirdre gave a self-deprecating smile and turned her head away. "Do you think you can just brush off my suffering with a simple 'it's no use for you to keep clinging on'?" Alfred frowned slightly, his hand involuntarily resting on the doorframe. "What exactly are you still holding against me?" Deirdre's long-buried anger finally found an outlet, torn open by Alfred. She stood up abruptly, meeting his gaze directly. "You ask what I'm holding against you. Where were you when I was being physically assaulted out there? Where were you when I was wronged, forced to resign, and condemned by the whole world? I endured everything all by myself. How dare you ask me to forget?" Deirdre's accusations were like sharp knives, piercing straight into Alfred's heart with deadly precision. Alfred parted his lips slightly but uttered not a single word. Deirdre vented her emotions until even the corners of her eyes turned red. Both fell into sudden silence. "Get out. I don't want to see you." Deirdre closed her eyes and turned her face away. Alfred's eyes gradually lost their light as he turned and walked away. The sound of the door closing was heard before Deirdre could no longer suppress her sobs. She had thought time could erase everything, but upon returning to this familiar place, that unbearable pain came rushing back. Deirdre returned to the courthouse for duty assignment that day, where a brief welcome ceremony had been prepared for her. The dean and other leaders all attended, and familiar faces came to offer their congratulations. The scene was lively. Deirdre sat in her original office, and her seemingly dead heart finally began to beat again. From now on, she would live each day as a brand new version of herself. Time flew by, and a month had passed in a flash. During this month, Deirdre was busy sorting through court files that had been left behind, and occasionally had to go back to do some persuasion work with Deirdre's mom. But every time Deirdre's mom was brought up in conversation, it always ended in a disagreement. Deirdre sat in the office, recalling the recent argument. Deirdre's mom had turned livid, her expression particularly unpleasant. Even as Deirdre was getting ready to leave, she caught a glimpse of Deirdre's mom swaying slightly in her peripheral vision. But at that time, Deirdre's mom's stubbornness ignited the fire of anger in Deirdre's heart. So even though she noticed something seemed physically wrong with her, Deirdre held her breath and didn't ask further. Looking back now, Deirdre felt her unease growing stronger. Deirdre took out her phone and booked a hospital appointment online. After work today, she must take Deirdre's mom to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Deirdre frowned tightly, unsure whether to call Deirdre's mom back. At that very moment, a familiar voice rang out outside the office, "Judge." The court assistant knocked on the door and peeked in from outside. "The City Daily wants to interview you. What do you think?" Deirdre had a favorable impression of this newspaper. It was the only news outlet that did not publish any leading reports during the public opinion storm surrounding Deirdre's incident at the time. Even on the day the case concluded, considerable space was devoted to writing about the fairness of the law. Deirdre smiled and nodded, saying, "Sure. Where should we do the interview?" The legal assistant promptly replied, 3 o'clock, at the studio in the suburbs. Deirdre glanced at the time, then stood up to grab her coat. "All right, I'll head over now." After leaving an out-of-office note at the front desk, Deirdre hailed a taxi and rushed toward the suburbs. The studio was bustling with people coming and going, with almost no one stopping to guide Deirdre. Deirdre weaved through the crowd, moving inward alone. Inside was a temporarily set-up interview room, well lit. The man on stage captured the attention of everyone present. Deirdre stood in the crowd, gazing intently at Alfred, facing the host's rapid-fire questions. He maintained a poised demeanor, articulating his views methodically, until the lights suddenly dimmed and the man stood up to shake hands with the host. The place finally began to buzz with noise. "Judge, let's go get your makeup done now, you're up next." A stagehand suddenly spoke up behind her. Deirdre froze, still not fully processing the situation. The man on stage shifted his gaze precisely onto Deirdre at that moment. Deirdre quickly averted her eyes and turned to the crew. "Let's go." The makeup session didn't take long, and soon, Deirdre was seated on the same sofa where Alfred had sat earlier. A crew member approached, bending slightly to make final preparations for Deirdre. "Your Honor, your phone." Deirdre handed her phone to the other person, but inadvertently noticed Alfred still standing in the corner. His gaze lingered on Deirdre, making her feel restless. Deirdre pushed aside all other scattered thoughts and focused entirely on the reporter in front of her. The interview proceeded in an orderly manner. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the crew member casually placed Deirdre's phone in Deirdre's dressing room before leaving. In the quiet dressing room, the phone screen suddenly lit up with a bright flash, emitting a prolonged vibration. No answer. After 50 seconds, the call automatically disconnected. The dark phone screen never lit up again. On the interview stage, Deirdre provided detailed answers to the recent hot legal issues that have been continuously emerging in society. With the host's gentle demeanor, Deirdre gradually opened up. "At the end of today's interview, allow us to indulge in a little gossip." The host's smile was radiant, making Deirdre feel completely at ease. Therefore, Deirdre nodded in agreement. The host put away the script, a glint of amusement in their eyes. "Your Honor appears quite young, yet handles matters with remarkable efficiency and maturity. So, in matters of the heart, would you say you tend to be the dominant one?" Deirdre was taken aback, her gaze involuntarily drifting toward Alfred. Alfred remained silent, just as he had in countless repetitive days of his life, responding with quietude. Deirdre gave a bitter smile, her fingers tightening slightly on the hem of her skirt. "Quite the opposite. I'm the vulnerable one in relationships, enduring all the grievances, yet never learning my lesson." The host's smile froze instantly on their face. Deirdre let out a light laugh, sweeping away the bitterness. "But at least people can feel pain. Choosing to let go in time might just be the wisest decision after all." As the words fell, Deirdre caught a glimpse of that figure turning to leave from the corner of her eye. Deirdre felt her heart sink slightly without realizing it. The host quickly tried to smooth things over with kind words, but Deirdre was no longer focused on the interview at all. Deirdre withdrew her gaze, and the smile at the corners of her lips slowly faded. Suddenly, Alfred leapt forward abruptly. Deirdre's pupils dilated as she stared in shock at the man who had barged into the frame. Alfred quickly approached Deirdre, dropping to one knee with unprecedented panic in his eyes. "Deirdre, come with me, Mom's in trouble." At that moment, Deirdre felt a violent roar erupt in her mind as all sounds from the world suddenly vanished. Deirdre couldn't process what Alfred had just said. She was only forced to stand, follow, and run. The hospital's antiseptic smell was so pungent it nearly made her vomit. Deirdre sat dazed in the hospital corridor, faint tinnitus still ringing in her ears, her eyes fixed on the silently crouching Alfred. "Deirdre, listen to me. No matter what happened, you need to stay calm." Deirdre's frozen mind finally began to turn slowly at this moment. How could Mom suddenly faint? When I saw her just a few days ago, wasn't she still? Deirdre's voice suddenly choked up. She couldn't help covering her face as tears continued to stream through her fingers. "No, I should have noticed earlier. She's gotten so thin, how could she possibly be fine?" Deirdre suddenly looked up, her eyes completely rimmed with red, she grabbed the hands of the person before her. Her body trembling uncontrollably. "Tell me the truth. What exactly happened to my mom?" Alfred clasped Deirdre's icy hands in return, a flash of anguish passing through his eyes. "Last summer, during Mom's physical examination, they already detected breast cancer. It was terminal." Deirdre's body collapsed backward involuntarily, the light in her eyes instantly extinguished. "Deirdre," Alfred exclaimed in shock, suddenly reaching out to pull her as Deirdre stiffly leaned against his chest. Soon after, Alfred felt his chest becoming damp from her tears. "I have something to tell you." Alfred hesitated for a moment, just about to speak when the emergency room doors slowly swung open. Deirdre immediately pushed past Alfred, rushing forward to grab the doctor's hand, her voice hoarse as she asked, "How's my mom?" The doctor, wearing a mask, revealed nothing but helplessness in his visible eyes. "The cancer cells have spread. We're temporarily keeping him alive with an oxygen machine. And his vital signs have just stabilized. But the patient has already lost consciousness, I'm afraid." Deirdre, her mind went completely blank with a deafening roar. Deirdre trembling, she tried to approach the doctor but suddenly lost all strength. "Doctor, the patient's blood pressure is dropping suddenly." The emergency room door suddenly swung open as a nurse grabbed the doctor's arm, her voice trembling. Deirdre rushed forward, only to be Alfred firmly blocked. The doctor rushed back into the emergency room, and no one noticed anymore that the door had been left wide open. Deirdre collapsed to the ground in despair. Through the gap of the door, she could only see the hurried footsteps of the medical staff. The ventilator's shrill alarm suddenly blared as the doctor knelt on the hospital bed, performing repeated resuscitations. Deirdre held her breath, as if her own brain was suffocating from lack of oxygen. 1 minute, 10 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. The doctor's movements finally paused, the crowd dispersed, leaving only a nurse behind. The nurse was speaking with Alfred nearby. Deirdre sat outside the door, stiffly turning her head to carefully decipher the shapes of their mouths. Some faint sounds reached my ears. He stopped breathing. "I did my best. Too bad she didn't live to see the final moment." "What? You didn't tell her? Such an important matter." Deirdre's pupils suddenly dilated. Alfred's previously inexplicable details suddenly made sense at this moment. Why did he suddenly make a promise to Deirdre's mom? And why, upon seeing her, did his eyes flicker with unspoken words? "Alfred." Deirdre couldn't care less that they were in a hospital, her voice hoarse as she cried out. Rage and despair consumed all her reason in that moment. "You knew all along, didn't you? That's why the hospital called you when they couldn't reach me." Alfred turned pale, yet found himself unable to refute. Deirdre gave a miserable smile, her entire being drained of its radiance. The two stood so close that Deirdre could easily discern the pity in his eyes. Deirdre felt all the entanglements, all the love and hatred, dissipate in this very moment. "Alfred, it's over between us." Never before Alfred had felt his heart so flustered as it was now. Deirdre had indeed spoken of giving up on this relationship before. But he always believed it was just her momentary anger talking. Once she cooled down, everything would return to normal. Alfred had always thought so. Their relationship spanned from their student days to the workplace and shouldn't be easily abandoned. They're just going through a temporary problem, there's always a solution. But at this moment, Alfred stood in the hospital. The woman before him was deathly pale, yet still managed to remain standing. She said, "Alfred, it's over between us." Alfred's first reaction was to find it absurd, followed immediately by an uncontrollable panic. He took a step forward, and the woman took a step back. In her eyes, there was pain, confusion, and despair, but no trace of love remained. According to the doctor, Deirdre's mom underwent treatment for nearly a year and a half. Begging the doctors not to call Deirdre, she endured all the chemotherapy sessions alone, until during one chemotherapy session, Deirdre's mom was in such unbearable pain that she nearly couldn't hold on. She called Alfred only to settle her final affairs, but afterward, both of them tacitly agreed not to mention this incident to Deirdre, as if nothing had ever happened. Deirdre's return was already a struggle for her, while Deirdre's mom insisted on being discharged from the hospital. Afraid of being noticed, she even asked the hospital nurse to apply a healthy-looking makeup for her. By the time Deirdre's mom returned to the hospital again, she was already at the end of her rope. Chapter 33. 3 days later, Deirdre's mom's funeral proceeded in an orderly manner. A light rain was still falling from the sky. Deirdre held the black portrait frame. Standing at the front of the crowd, Alfred held a black umbrella over Deirdre's head. Deirdre was followed by Deirdre's mom's closest friends from her lifetime, most in their 50s or 60s, supporting each other with red-rimmed eyes. As the crowd waiting to pay their respects gradually dispersed, The sky had grown dark. Alfred couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes as he said hoarsely, "Let's go home. It's getting cold." Deirdre didn't respond. Her face showed no expression, her lips chapped from dryness. Alfred couldn't help but hold Deirdre's hand, only to find it colder than the sky at this moment. "Do you want Mom to see you in this withered state, worrying about you even after death? Get away from me." Deirdre violently wrenched her arm free, frantically scrubbing at her skin as if contaminated by something filthy. "Deirdre." Alfred's eyes reddened as he stared at her in disbelief. "Stop pushing me away, please." Deirdre let out a low, mirthless laugh without looking at him, murmuring, "Then go die. I'll forgive you when you're dead." Alfred felt a suffocating tightness in his chest. Only now did he realize. So this was how it felt to be verbally assaulted. Back when she was being slandered, everyone online had been telling her to die. Whose heart ached more, hers then or hers now? "Don't deliberately provoke me. I promised Mom I'd take good care of you from now on." Alfred swallowed all his bitterness and silently stood behind Deirdre. Deirdre glanced at him sarcastically and said bitterly, "Your idea of good care is making me miss the last chance to see my mother. That's truly unconventional." Deirdre's body swayed as her crimson eyes seemed to grow even more bloodshot in her dazed state. "Get out. For the sake of the year you spent taking care of my mother, I won't argue with you anymore." Her indifferent demeanor now felt even more disconcerting than when she had been furiously arguing before. Alfred closed his eyes and tilted the umbrella completely toward Deirdre. Raindrops struck his face, his body, gradually submerging him entirely. "I won't leave. It was you who pulled me back into the normal world before. Now, it's my turn." Alfred lost both his parents in an accident during his third year of junior high. Overnight, he became someone all his relatives avoided like the plague. In the end, the court awarded custody to his aunt, along with all his parents' inheritance. No one could treat two children fairly, especially when one of them wasn't their own. At the start of 10th grade, Deirdre noticed Alfred had lost at least one clothing size in just 2 months. She didn't dare ask too much, just dragged Alfred around every day, laughing and joking. She scoured the internet for countless corny jokes, only to recite them to him word for word the next day. Hearing classmates jokingly call him a jinx, Deirdre charged over like a madwoman, throwing punches and kicks. Through it all, Alfred remained impassive, like a wooden puppet. Until Deirdre was dragged by the hair by a vengeful classmate and forced into the girls' restroom. She was gone for the entire afternoon. Alfred sat in the classroom, motionless. Only when Deirdre ran up to him wearing a face mask did Alfred finally move his eyes, staring at her numbly. "Are you leaving me too?" Deirdre's tears fell on her mask, vanishing instantly. No, no, Deirdre would never abandon Alfred. Deirdre threw herself into Alfred's arms as she spoke, bursting into loud sobs. Alfred slowly embraced her, holding her tightly as if trying to melt her into his arms. Afterwards, Alfred quickly noticed Deirdre's facial wound. In just one day, those students completely vanished from the school. But from that day onward, Alfred never again displayed excessive emotions. Deirdre had always believed that Alfred could quickly break free from despair, largely because he was strong enough. But little did she know, deep down, he had never truly healed with the passage of time. But what does this have to do with her? No matter how much he suffers, this relationship has already been set in stone. Deirdre startled awake from her memories, tears silently sliding down to her chin. She exhaled deeply, the fog blurring the scene before her eyes. Deirdre's mom, the cold, lifeless tomb, stood there, its occupant no longer there to scold her by pulling her ears. Her world suddenly grew quiet and desolate. Deirdre said nothing more, offering no rebuttal to Alfred's words as she clutched the funeral portrait and walked down the hill. Alfred chased after her with an umbrella, shielding her completely from the rain. When Deirdre returned to Deirdre's mom's house, not even a single corner of her clothes was wet. Deirdre didn't mind that Alfred followed closely behind her into the house. To be precise, Deirdre suddenly stopped caring about everything in the outside world. Alfred stared intently at Deirdre and tried to strike up a conversation. "Deirdre, I made some food, try to eat a little." Deirdre sat motionless on the sofa, resting her chin on her knees. Alfred sat at the dining table, watching helplessly as the meal he'd prepared grew cold. What flashed through his mind, however, was Deirdre's countless instances of waiting for him at that very table. Alfred suddenly let out a self-deprecating laugh. "Deirdre, don't I look just like you used to now?" Deirdre didn't respond. Alfred kept talking to himself. "I always think of you as that naive Deirdre from high school. No matter how many times I push you away, the next moment, you'd come back grinning and sticking to me." Alfred actually had a hint of a smile in his eyes. "Truth is, I'm not as good as you think." Not gentle, not considerate, and certainly not good at cheering you up, but you just cling to me tightly, as if you'd burst into tears the second you're apart from me. For a while, I couldn't even tell whether I was with you because I liked you, or simply because I'd grown accustomed to your presence. But, Deirdre. Alfred turned his head away, staring directly at Deirdre's lifeless profile. I've never felt such intense self-loathing just from witnessing someone else's sorrow. I can say with certainty now, it's not just habit. I truly love you. Alfred spoke in a detached tone, never expecting Deirdre to react in any particular way. The way she was now mirrored exactly how he had been back then. At least he'd been able to direct his hatred toward the perpetrator back then, whereas now, she could only loathe her own helplessness. Alfred dumped the cold food into the trash bin, then walked over to Deirdre, crouching down to meet her at eye level. Deirdre. I've requested a month-long leave for you, rest well at home. Deirdre suddenly looked up, her bloodshot eyes fixed intently on him. I'm going to work. Her voice was hoarse beyond measure, yet the stubbornness within it was unmistakable. Alfred frowned disapprovingly, instinctively preparing to argue again. But when he met Deirdre's eyes, Alfred suddenly realized, the reason things had turned out this way between them was his own excessive self-righteousness. Alfred clutched Deirdre's hand tightly, trying to warm it with his own. Fine, but promise me, you'll let me stay by your side always. Deirdre forcefully pulled her hand away, her gaze drifting to some unknown point. She didn't refuse. Alfred let out a relieved sigh and simply sat down beside her. Don't push me away, please. Deirdre heard him whisper softly, her fingers trembling slightly, whether the law firm truly had few cases recently, or whether Alfred had genuinely stopped caring altogether. When Deirdre dragged her exhausted body to the courthouse the next day, he unexpectedly followed her. The two entered the courthouse one after another, maintaining an unbroken silence between them. The court made no excessive interference regarding Alfred's sudden appearance, merely reminding Deirdre in passing to maintain confidentiality before letting the matter drop. Deirdre carried on as if nothing had happened. Going about her usual routine at the courthouse, when dealing with difficult clients during mediation, her approach was always meticulous. Everyone believed Deirdre had moved on from the blow of her mother's passing. Only Alfred knew she had sunk deeper into self-blame. After returning home from work, Deirdre would often talk to the empty sofa. Mom, where did you put my coat? I did listen to you. I ate all the carrots. I didn't pick at my food. My God. Are you really going to do aerobics in the living room? If the neighbors come complaining about the noise, don't expect me to handle it. Her tone was cheerful, but the context kept shifting unpredictably. Until recently, Alfred even thought that in her delusions, she had already returned to her high school days. Alfred could never join in this fantasy, as if he had been completely excluded from her world. After consulting professional doctors, Alfred decided to use strong external stimuli to shatter Deirdre's protective shell. Alfred even invited Deirdre's best friend, Elsa, to participate. Elsa sat across from Alfred, sighing silently. If only I had noticed Deirdre's distress earlier, perhaps she wouldn't have suffered so much. Alfred shook his head, his eyes heavy with guilt. No, I was the one who made this happen. Elsa fell silent, and for a moment, both of them were quiet. Then I'll leave this matter in your hands. Alfred stood up and bowed. Elsa quickly rose to her feet, waving her hands with reddened eyes. Even if you hadn't asked, I would have found a way to help her. Alfred nodded and was about to leave. Elsa stopped him, hesitation flickering across her face. After a long pause, she finally asked, will you divorce Deirdre? Alfred turned around, his expression resolute. No, and never will be. Elsa relaxed her brow slightly before asking again, do you pity Deirdre, or is there some other reason? Alfred looked solemnly at Elsa. What I did before was indeed wrong, so I don't expect Deirdre to forgive me, but I'm very clear about my feelings for her. It has always been love, from beginning to end. Elsa finally let out a sigh of relief, her eyes turning to one of release. The only reason I hope you stay by her side is that she loves you, but if Deirdre truly chooses to let go, then I hope you can move on with grace. Alfred's eyes reddened slightly, his voice dim. I know. Elsa sighed, stood up, and turned to leave. I'm going to Auntie's house now to take her to school. Whether we can pull her out of despair really depends on you. Alfred watched Elsa's retreating figure, closed his eyes, and recalled the psychologist's words in his mind. There's another way to save her. Find the one thing she cares about most, and make her experience it firsthand. By hitting rock bottom, she might have a chance to regain clarity. Deirdre didn't want to go out at first, but Elsa said, it's our 10-year graduation anniversary. Don't you want to visit our alma mater? As soon as these words were spoken, Deirdre couldn't help but feel waves of emotion stirring in her heart. It's been 10 years since graduation. Deirdre hasn't gone back even once. To say she doesn't miss high school life would be a lie. Though there might have been unpleasant experiences at school, Deirdre still cherishes the memories of her youthful days. After finishing her work at the courthouse, Deirdre hailed a taxi and rushed to her alma mater. At the school gate, Deirdre simply signed the visitor log and entered the campus without hindrance. Deirdre gazed at the unfamiliar yet familiar campus before her, countless images flashing through her mind. Gradually, Deirdre's eyes grew increasingly red. When she reached her former classroom, Deirdre froze in place instantly. There were 5 or 6 people scattered around inside Deirdre as soon as she stepped into the classroom. Their eyes turned toward her, familiar faces broke into smiles she remembered well. None of them had changed. Deirdre clamped a hand over her mouth, swallowing her gasp. "Deirdre, what took you so long? We're almost late, don't you know?" A girl rushed over and gave Deirdre a big hug. Deirdre focused her gaze. It was her former group leader. "Deirdre, do you still doze off at work now? I remember you used to get dizzy every math class." Deirdre burst out laughing and looked at the math class representative. "I'm doing what I love, so I'm not sleepy at all. Do you still like Mayday?" Deirdre paused thoughtfully before nodding again. "Though it's been ages since I last listened to music, if you ask who I like best, it's definitely still them." Deirdre's eyes instantly reddened completely. Elsa hid her hands behind her back, her face beaming with that signature silly grin of hers. Deirdre gazed at her tenderly, her heart aching yet brimming with happiness. "Do you remember the time capsule we buried at graduation?" Elsa suddenly raised the box in her hands. "The 10-year mark has arrived. Did you become the adult you wanted to be?" Deirdre froze completely on the spot. Elsa handed the box to Deirdre. Its weight unfamiliar, she couldn't even recall what she'd stored inside all those years ago. Deirdre numbly pried open the rusted old container. Inside lay a once trendy MP3 player, a dull cracked stone, and a messy pile of folded paper stars, and one yellowed slip of paper. "Deirdre wants to be with Alfred forever. P.S. Plus my mom." Another P.S., reluctantly adding Elsa. Deirdre's tears finally fell at this moment, as she helplessly hugged the box and sobbed aloud, "Elsa." Deirdre's heart surged with endless sorrow and pain, and she couldn't help but embrace the girl before her. "I don't have a mother anymore." Elsa's eyes were red-rimmed, her voice nearly choking with emotion. "You still have us. We'll always be here for you." Deirdre shook her head violently, her voice full of bitterness. "I lost all of you. It's my fault." Elsa tightly hugged Deirdre and whispered soothingly, "It's all right, haven't we all come back now?" Elsa looked at the people nearby with a smile. "See, I just said Deirdre needed you, and they all came running from the ends of the earth. Auntie is gone, but those left behind must carry on her unfinished wishes and continue to live happily. Deirdre, you deserve happiness." Deirdre's emotions gradually calmed down amidst everyone's comforting words. After completely calming down, she actually became somewhat embarrassed. "I was fine all along, just needed a good cry." Deirdre sat in the classroom, looking at her former classmates before her, and couldn't help but blush as she recalled her earlier outburst. "You had to pull this stunt and make a fool of me in front of everyone." Elsa finally relaxed for real, moving closer to Deirdre and saying earnestly, "So what? This is fine too. Ever since you started working, you've become more and more composed, just like a second Alfred." Deirdre froze, her gaze scattering. But she didn't catch sight of that familiar figure. Elsa adjusted her head straight and sighed. "Stop looking, he didn't come." Deirdre's eyes dimmed. Elsa could tell exactly what she was thinking at a glance and sighed even more deeply. All these people were actually called by him. "You've scared him half to death these past few days. Such a proud man. When he begged me for help, even his eyes were red. What a twisted fate the two of you share." Deirdre forced a smile and stood up. Facing everyone, "Thank you all for coming today. All expenses today are on me." "Hooray!" The crowd cheered. Deirdre's smile finally gained a touch of genuineness at this moment. "Clark isn't coming?" Deirdre asked in confusion. Elsa rolled her eyes at her. "Alfred would never let a love rival show up at an occasion like this. He's not stupid." Deirdre froze, then shoved Elsa abruptly. "What love rival? Don't talk nonsense." Elsa helplessly looked at Deirdre. "Don't play dumb with me. That story Clark told last time was clearly about you." Deirdre was momentarily speechless. Elsa gave her a sidelong glance and continued, "It's obvious he still can't forget you. Who knows, you two might rekindle your old connection." Deirdre waved her hands nervously. "I'm in no mood for this right now. I'm still not divorced yet." Elsa had a sudden look of realization. "Oh, so after the divorce we can be together, right, Elsa?" Deirdre pretended to be angry and chased after her. Elsa quickly ran away, shouting loudly, "Once you're divorced, I'll set you up with Clark." Deirdre heard the knowing cheers behind her, her face turning red as she prepared to cover Elsa's mouth. A figure appeared at the back of the classroom. Elsa was still flirting recklessly, unaware of the danger. "If you ask me, you should have dumped Alfred ages ago, so cold and heartless. Being with him will never bring you happiness." Deirdre's gaze suddenly dimmed, her footsteps freezing mid-stride. The classroom fell into complete silence. The others watched as the face of the person at the back of the classroom instantly darkened. The math class representative grabbed Elsa and said with an awkward smile, "We'll go ahead, you two take your time." Elsa was about to lose her temper when she suddenly saw who had arrived, and all her anger instantly deflated. Deirdre turned her head, feeling a slight bitterness in her heart. To be honest, her mood has been truly terrible lately. Even the most optimistic person would be dragged down and develop depressive feelings because of this. Yet he always stood Deirdre's ground. It must be said that during those times when she pretended to be normal, she came close to breaking down several times. But the moment she turned around and saw Alfred staring motionlessly at her, it was as if a surge of strength welled up in her heart. She couldn't bring herself to forgive Alfred for withholding the truth. But she might have done the same in his position. Deirdre seemed equally incapable of telling Alfred in advance that his loved one might have cancer, because they both loved each other deeply. But if he still loved her, why was he being so distant? Alfred's sudden appearance abruptly ended the 10-year class reunion. Elsa swiped Deirdre's card and breezily led the others to the next venue. Meanwhile, the two of them returned home in prolonged silence. The living room was filled with Deirdre's mom's packed-up belongings. Though the space was nearly overflowing with items, Alfred still showed no intention of sorting through them. "This should be what you need to do, decide what can stay and what should be cleared out." Alfred spoke calmly, as usual. Deirdre felt a pang in her chest but said, "Alfred, I've made up my mind. Let's get divorced tomorrow." Alfred suddenly fell silent. The entire house was silent except for the sound of their breathing. "I need to take a break, both as your wife and for myself." Alfred's breathing suddenly became rapid, but he still said nothing. "If you're unwilling to divorce, then we'll proceed with litigation." "Fine." Alfred abruptly cut off Deirdre mid-sentence. His voice was already hoarse, tinged with a hint of sorrow. "No lawsuit. We're breaking up." Alfred gazed at Deirdre with eyes full of pleading, and even more so, helplessness. Deirdre's words hung in the air. Alfred suddenly had red-rimmed eyes as he took a few steps back, maintaining a distance that was no longer intimate. "But promise me you'll live happily. Don't become a second version of me like Elsa said." Deirdre whirled around, her eyes filled with disbelief. But Alfred had already left. He heard everything. Deirdre covered her face, unable to hold back her tears. The next day, Alfred appeared punctually at the Civil Affairs office. The two submitted their divorce application. After the cooling-off period for divorce ended, they once again confirmed the fact of their divorce. This time, it took only 10 short minutes for Deirdre and Alfred's legal marriage to be dissolved. The moment she stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau's door, Deirdre felt as if a boulder had been lifted from her heart. Alfred stood behind her, watching her intently. Deirdre smiled in relief, turned to look at Alfred, and reached out her hand. "Thank you for being my lover these 5 years." Alfred also smiled faintly, but his smile was clearly filled with bitterness. He grasped Deirdre's hand in return, squeezing it tightly. "And thank you too, for loving me so wholeheartedly all these years." Deirdre couldn't help blinking hard as a stinging sensation rushed to her brain, unexpectedly making her nose tingle with emotion. After loving him for so many years, had she ever truly taught him how to love in return? "You must take good care of yourself from now on." Deirdre didn't let go, her voice now thick with unshed tears. No matter how busy you are with work, remember to eat. Don't just sit in the office all the time. Remember to go out and relax occasionally. And don't forget to water the plants I bought on time. Why do you only know how to say Don't you have anything you want to say to me? Where are you planning to go after the divorce?" "To my mom's hometown. She's always bragged about how stunningly beautiful it is. Can I come visit you?" "No. Is there anything else? If not, I'll be leaving now." Deirdre forced back the tears in her eyes and looked at Alfred once more. Alfred lowered his head, his expression unreadable. Deirdre smiled gently and turned to leave. "I love you." Alfred's voice came from behind. Deirdre paused mid-step. "Goodbye." Deirdre lowered her head with a smile, the obsession in her heart quietly dissipating. 5 years later, Deirdre, dressed in casual uniform, walked through the quiet woods as Clark's steady voice came through her headphones. "Intel suggests the suspect was once spotted in these woods." Deirdre carefully picked her way through the dry branches and fallen leaves, wary of falling into any forest traps. Then did your informant mention how long ago Once Upon a Time was? Clark suddenly froze over there, then gave an awkward smile. 20 years ago, Deirdre couldn't help but roll her eyes at this. Clark, I must be out of my mind to believe your nonsense. You'd trust memories from 20 years ago. Clark chuckled on the other end of the line and continued. But this is the only lead in the amusement park disappearance case. Whether it's real or fake, we've got to check it out in person. Right, Deirdre sighed helplessly. So that's why you're bothering me. I'm just a lawyer, not some adventurer, okay? Clark was momentarily at a loss for words, then promptly ended the call using poor signal as an excuse. Deirdre let out a deep sigh after being hung up on. Then, keep moving forward. During these 5 years, Deirdre resigned from her court job and became a public interest lawyer working for state welfare. After all the twists and turns, she finally found her way back to this path, and today. It was because of Clark's phone call that Deirdre cut short her hard-earned vacation and headed alone to this remote forest. The amusement park disappearance case was one Deirdre had encountered while filming a variety show back then. This unsolved case had left Deirdre with a deep impression at the time. A terminally ill criminal abducted a girl in broad daylight, then vanished into the sea of people. Back then, nearly half the city's police force was mobilized to find the girl. Yet both the perpetrator and the girl remained missing. 20 years later, the police station suddenly discovered a long-overlooked tip-off note in their archives. The note said that the suspect had been seen at this location, accompanied by a child. After many years, the case suddenly made significant progress, and everyone was thrilled. Clark led a team to the witness's home, while Deirdre followed other officers to the location mentioned in the tip-off note. Deirdre reached out to push aside the branches blocking her path, stepping steadily on the muddy ground. A long time passed. Yet everyone remained empty-handed. 20 years have gone by. What useful clues could possibly remain? Who knows, that little girl from back then might have long since turned to bones. Deirdre listened to the young officers grumbling around her, an involuntary wave of helplessness rising in her heart. Come here, found a skeleton. Another powerful male voice rang out from the slope below. Holy shit, there really are bones down here, the young officer exclaimed in shock as he quickly slid down the slope. Deirdre felt her heart skip a beat as she turned toward the sound. Before them lay a steep, densely wooded slope, the kind where one careless step could send you tumbling down if you weren't paying attention. Deirdre carefully steadied herself against a tree as she slowly slid down. Just as she arrived at the scene, she saw the police quickly setting up a cordon. An officer reached out to stop Deirdre, his gaze unusually grave. Stop right there. There's indeed a male corpse ahead. Since this involves a homicide case, Attorney Deirdre should wait until Captain Gary returns before getting involved. Deirdre startled abruptly, her gaze involuntarily darting forward. Forensic experts and police officers crouched beneath a large tree, their chaotic silhouettes faintly revealing glimpses of white bones. Deirdre quickly turned away, a wave of panic washing over her. Though she knew this sight would haunt her nightmares, Deirdre couldn't suppress her innate curiosity and peered through the crowd once more. Where the tree roots coiled, a flash of crimson captured her entire attention. What is that? Deirdre couldn't help but ask. Following the sound, the officer speculated. Perhaps it's that child's coat. I remember she was wearing a red padded jacket on the day of the accident. Deirdre stared fixedly at the red coat when suddenly, her chest tightened as if she couldn't breathe, a suffocating sensation overwhelming her mind. Are you okay? A familiar voice sounded behind Deirdre. Deirdre whirled around to see Clark suddenly standing before her. The suffocating feeling vanished. Deirdre let out a sigh of relief, no longer looking in that direction, though a lingering fear still gripped her heart. I'm fine. Clark's face turned grave as he gazed at the woman before him, his heart surging with emotion. Deirdre, I have something important to tell you. Deirdre stared blankly at the other person, her heart suddenly pounding for reasons unknown. Clark shifted his gaze toward the corpse beneath the tree. We found the child's last known whereabouts. Deirdre brightened instantly. The child isn't dead. Clark nodded decisively, his eyes holding an inscrutable expression. After fleeing the city, the criminal took the child into the woods. Unable to see the path clearly at night, they fell down a slope. The adult hit his head against a tree stump at the bottom of the slope and died instantly. The child removed his blood-stained coat and escaped, eventually collapsing at the entrance of an orphanage. Deirdre genuinely felt happy for the child and eagerly continued asking, has that orphanage been found? It's been found. Clark stared intently at Deirdre, not missing a single expression on her face. That welfare institution is called Sunshine Orphanage. Deirdre boarded the police car for the return trip, resting her head against the window with an expressionless face. The phone beside her kept vibrating, but Deirdre had no mind to answer it. Clark's words were like an alarm clock, endlessly echoing in her mind. Before being adopted by Deirdre's mom, she had lived in Sunshine Orphanage. This coincidence was far too astonishing. Deirdre refused to dwell on what it might imply, desperately trying to empty her mind completely. If she didn't think about it, perhaps she could pretend not to know, yet to cooperate with the police investigation. Deirdre returned to the city she hadn't seen in years. Sitting at the familiar desk, the officer taking Deirdre's statement turned out to be that same dispatcher girl from before. "Hello, I'm Linda. I'm here to question you about the amusement park disappearance case." Linda was no longer the lively, adorable girl from 5 years ago. She had cut her long hair short and carried herself with newfound composure. Deirdre's mind went blank, but she still managed to force a nod. "What year did you come to Sunshine Orphanage?" Deirdre thought carefully. "It should be 2004. Linda nodded and asked, "Do you have any memories from before coming to the orphanage?" Deirdre shook her head. "The director said I was injured before. I lost all memories before the age of 8. Linda paused in surprise, then quickly followed up. "Then your blood type is?" Deirdre nervously clenched her fingers. "Rh negative." Linda paused, her expression instantly turning grave. "All the details match. Born in 1996. Went missing in 2004. Same orphanage. Memory impairment due to excessive blood loss compounded by a rare blood type delaying transfusion." "Deirdre, you're very likely the child who was kidnapped back then." Deirdre stumbled out of the police station in a daze, her heart pounding uncontrollably. At this moment, she had no idea how to go on. In a daze, she followed her heart's true choice and dialed the number she hadn't called in 5 whole years. The phone was answered quickly, but there was only silence on the other end. "Alfred, I think I've found my birth parents." Deirdre instantly lost all reason. Overwhelmed by a surge of panic and grievance, she couldn't help but vent her emotions to the person on the other end of the phone. "Where are you?" Alfred's voice suddenly turned frantic. Even the sound of him abruptly standing up, the scrape of his chair against the floor, was audible. Deirdre squatted down miserably, her voice hoarse. "I'm at the police station. Don't go anywhere. Wait for me right there." Alfred hurriedly hung up the phone. Deirdre snapped back to reality, suddenly realizing that in her moment of panic, the first person she thought of was still him. The ties between them were probably something that could never be fully reckoned. Alfred arrived swiftly. The moment he stepped out of the car, his gaze instantly found her amidst the rushing crowd. Deirdre stood motionless, watching as the man strode toward her from a distance. He had lost weight, noticeably so. Compared to before, his entire demeanor now carried an added layer of aloofness, an air of detachment. "Didn't he listen to me and eat on time?" Deirdre's mind gradually fixated on this single thought. How could he have gotten so thin? Alfred crouched before Deirdre, his gaze clinging to every inch of her skin. "Let's go home first." Just those words made Deirdre almost burst into tears with grievance. Deirdre nodded vigorously. When Deirdre returned to that home belonging only to the two of them again, a strange yet familiar feeling washed over her. "I haven't moved your things much, just hoping that when you come back one day, it won't feel unfamiliar to you." Alfred pulled off the sofa cover, revealing the dolls that Deirdre had bought still placed underneath. "I'm not very good at cleaning, and I'm afraid of dirt, so I just covered up most of the house." Deirdre felt a pang of sadness. Though the house looked exactly the same as before, it clearly lacked the warmth of lived-in spaces. "Have a seat first, I'll get you a cup of hot water." Alfred got up and went to the kitchen, taking out the kettle only to find his hand covered in dust. Deirdre suddenly smiled and sat on the sofa, watching him coldly begin to wash the kettle. But just a few minutes after boiling, the kettle's light went out. Alfred frowned, holding the kettle carefully to inspect it. Deirdre lost interest in the spectacle and sighed. "This kettle has a loose connection. You have to keep pressing the plug, or it'll come loose." Alfred's hand froze mid-air. Deirdre felt another pang of sorrow after speaking. "Alfred, in these 5 years, have you not even had a sip of hot water?" Alfred set down the kettle in his hand, his entire figure shrouded in the warm yellow kitchen light, appearing utterly desolate. "When I have free time, I can't help but think of you, so I have to keep myself as busy as possible." Alfred analyzed his own feelings with remarkable calmness, as if he were narrating someone else's story. "But there are always moments when I'm not busy, and then I inevitably remember you and me back then. At that time, if I'm being honest, I always harbored a faint resentment toward you in my heart. Do you remember the child we had together?" Alfred suddenly looked straight at Deirdre, his eyes filled with endless despair. Deirdre was stunned. and sadness welled up in her heart. I remember, Deirdre's voice grew low, we had our first child not long after we got married. Because of my carelessness, we lost him forever, Alfred continued without pause. Yes, when I heard the news, I completely lost my mind. I resent you for caring only about work, I resent you for neglecting our home, and most of all, I resent you for going to work as if nothing happened after we lost our child. I keep wondering if you didn't care about this child. Do you even care about me at all? Alfred's voice suddenly choked up. Deirdre's breath hitched as she stared at him with red-rimmed eyes. Do you love me? Do you really love me? Alfred shook his head and said bitterly, I can't see it at all. All I saw was you quickly leaving the law firm, then going to court and rising step by step. Everyone who sees you now has to address you as Judge Deirdre. So I began to suspect that you probably didn't love me. That's why I started being afraid to meet your eyes. Alfred's emotions suddenly spiraled out of control as he lowered his head, transparent tears falling straight onto the floor. Deirdre seemed to have 1,000 words she wanted to say, but at this moment, she could only turn her head away, struggling to hold back her tears. The only reason I paid special attention to that woman was because of her child. Alfred gave a desolate smile, his eyes even carrying a trace of longing. That child happened to be 5 years old, and when they saw me, they actually called me Dad. Alfred suddenly turned to look at Deirdre, his voice trembling with emotion. I didn't cheat, and I don't love another woman. I'm just too weak, too cowardly. You're the one in my life meant to be the savior. While I'm just a despicable coward, Deirdre looked at Alfred in disbelief, the tears that had long welled up in her eyes finally spilling over at this moment. I never thought you cheated on me. I'm just sad. Why didn't you tell me about any of these things? Deirdre stepped forward and grabbed Alfred's shirt, pulling him down to her eye level. Look into my eyes and tell me now, do you really think I love you or not? Alfred dazedly met Deirdre's gaze. In that instant, he seemed like a child who had just learned to read people's expressions. Carefully, earnestly, he studied every emotion in the woman's eyes before him. I grieve for our lost child. But what pains me more is that every day you turned your back on me, we were equally suffering the same torment. Deirdre did not wait for Alfred's response, but gently pulled him into her embrace. Alfred, if you can't feel my love, you can come hold me, then you'll know my love for you has remained constant, never diminishing by even a fraction. Alfred's body stiffened abruptly. He curled up in Deirdre's arms, reaching out to gently encircle her body. Don't you hate me? I've been so awful to you. Alfred lowered his head, his voice muffled as it emerged from Deirdre's embrace. I do hate you. Deirdre successfully made Alfred's body stiffen even more. But after hating you for so many years, the moment I saw you again, all I could think was how much thinner you've become. Deirdre couldn't help but choke up as well, her voice becoming fragmented. Alfred, tell me, why didn't you listen to me and eat properly? Alfred suddenly reached out and wrapped his arms around Deirdre's entire body, holding her tightly with force. He pressed himself closely against Deirdre, his voice trembling. His tears slid down Deirdre's collar, falling onto her chest and seeping into her heart, giving all the burning passion without reservation. Deirdre, I miss you so much. I really miss you so much. That night, they didn't return to their original relationship, even after the embrace. They found themselves at a loss for words, both choosing to retreat immediately to their own rooms, hiding away. Deirdre lay in bed, her mind filled with thoughts of Alfred next door. Alfred lay in bed, his mind filled with thoughts of Deirdre next door. They longed for each other, yet neither dared to take that brave step forward. The next day, Alfred was the first to knock on Deirdre's door. He stood at the doorway, nervously eyeing the lump under the bedsheets. Deirdre, your biological parents have just arrived at the police station. The DNA test results confirm they are indeed related to you. Deirdre abruptly lifted her head from the bed, her face filled with tension. Alfred gave a faint smile and reassured her. Don't worry, I'll be with you. Deirdre thought for a moment, met Alfred's gaze, and hesitated no longer. Let's go together. Alfred paused in surprise, then broke into a smile. Inside the police station, a grey-haired couple waited anxiously. Clark stood beside them, offering comfort. Don't worry, your daughter has been doing very well these years. She ranked second in her grade, served as a judge, and has now returned to being a lawyer. Oh, and she's been divorced once. Well, her life has indeed been eventful. The woman's reddened eyes flashed with sorrow. What? She's been divorced once. It's all my fault. Clark let out a dry laugh. This probably shouldn't be blamed on you. The woman continued to sob into her hands. If only I had kept a better eye on her, she wouldn't have been kidnapped, and if she hadn't been kidnapped, she wouldn't have fallen into the wrong hands. In the end, isn't it all my fault? The woman's husband tirelessly comforted the woman in his arms, his eyes rimmed red. A grown man moved to tears. Clark watched on, then suddenly broke into a relieved smile. So this world still had couples who loved each other till old age. Just then, the conference room door opened. Linda opened the door. Followed by Deirdre and Alfred, Clark's smile suddenly froze. Linda silently stepped behind Clark and let out a cold snort. Stop thinking about it. They've already made up. After all these years of waiting, you still haven't given up. Clark glanced sideways at Linda and mimicked her tone with a retort. None of your business. Linda rolled her eyes at him and decisively left the room. Clark looked at the crowd before him. In the chaos, they all clung together in a huddle, their cries and wails shaking the heavens and earth. Clark suddenly laughed. After stepping outside, Clark saw Linda crouching by the curb eating corn and went over to squat beside her. Linda, why did you suddenly cut your hair short? Linda paused mid-bite and snapped. I cut it short 2 years ago. Clark chuckled again. Haha, truly worthy of being my disciple. Now you're starting to look a bit like me. Linda snorted coldly and took a few steps back with her corn. Clark pressed closer. By the way, why does a girl like you always stay on the front lines? I remember you had a chance for promotion a few years back. Linda couldn't take it anymore and shoved the corn in her hand straight into Clark's mouth. None of your business. With that, Linda stood up and made to leave. Clark stared in surprise, the corn cob still dangling from his mouth. Watching Linda's retreating figure that was clearly seething with anger, Linda suddenly whirled around, rushed back, snatched the corn from his mouth, her eyes rimmed red. Yeah, because I'm so stupid, that's why I've been following you around like a lost puppy. I'm begging you, when you're chasing after someone else, could you at least turn around once in a while? There's a fool running after you too, you know. Clark stood frozen in place. Linda bit fiercely into her corn and turned to leave. Clark only then snapped out of it and bolted after her. Linda, so you actually like me? Get lost, Linda. You shouldn't be so rude when facing your secret crush. Get lost, Linda. If you keep being this fierce, I might stop liking you. Get the hell out of here. It had been a long time since Deirdre's parents found her. Deirdre still couldn't interact naturally with her biological parents. But fortunately, they were a very reasonable couple. After some discussion, they decided to start building their relationship with weekly family dinners, and Alfred never missed a single one. It was another prearranged family gathering, and the agreed meeting place turned out to be a grassland in the suburbs. Deirdre hadn't seen Alfred since morning, and a shadow of melancholy settled in her heart. To make matters worse, Elsa had to chime in with her 2 cents. Honestly, I think men are inherently incorrigible. Look how quickly, just one cycle of the seasons, and he's already stopped caring about you. Deirdre looked helplessly at Elsa's attempts to sow discord. Though puzzled in her heart, she no longer felt the unease that had troubled her before. Perhaps through this separation, they finally learned to trust each other. Deirdre patted Elsa's head reassuringly and gazed toward the center of the meadow. A singer was performing there, singing a song. Deirdre couldn't resist being drawn to the music and pulled Elsa over. When I met you, I realized that I had fallen in love with you at first sight. I want to stay by your side forever and become the person who coexists with you hand in hand. Can you take another look at me and place your hand in the palm of my hand? Deirdre stared blankly at the singer performing the all-too-familiar song before her, her eyes suddenly reddening. Thank you for being my only lover in my life. Thank you for existing in my life, my one and only love. A familiar voice suddenly sounded from behind. The moment his gentle singing voice rose, Deirdre felt everything around her grow quiet. Deirdre's family had unknowingly stood together with Elsa at some point. Deirdre saw the man before her singing the very song he had written for his marriage proposal during their university days. Once again, he appeared solemnly before her eyes. Alfred was dressed in a white suit with a pink rose pinned to his chest, holding a microphone. He walked step by step toward Deirdre. Catch! Clark held Linda's hand and tossed the bouquet they had deliberately saved from their wedding directly toward them. Alfred caught the bouquet steadily, an uncharacteristically shy expression appearing on his face. Deirdre felt as if the entire world had begun to reverse. In her daze, she seemed to see her younger self again. Chasing after the one she loved most, with no one else in her eyes or heart, she did countless absurd things for him. Her entire adolescence pulsed because of him. But fortunately, their union was built upon a foundation of love. As long as love persists, the bond between them will remain eternally intertwined. The only beloved of my life, mutually enamored. Bonus chapter. Deirdre on the day of her second marriage, Alfred her ex-husband, also attended the ceremony. Alfred stood on the stage. Thinking that having already experienced one wedding ceremony, he wouldn't cry this time. but when Deirdre appeared before him in her wedding dress, he couldn't help but tear up. Alfred wore on his wrist the old watch Deirdre had given him in her youth. He stood on the stage, watching the greatest happiness of his life slowly walking toward him. The end.